the notification.
Okay.
Oh, it looks good.
And we're live.
Yeah, I'm seeing
Sorry, I
it
had
on
to. I'm gonna try and find a way to keep track of the chat this time because last time that didn't go so good. It's just like too many things happening at once. All right.
Oh, hey, Martin's online. Hey, Martin.
Hey, Martin. How's it going? All right. Yeah, so this is, I guess, episode 2 of the Headphone Show's live stream. We'll see how it goes. We have below me to my right, will be my left, I guess, but on the right side of the screen is Tyler. He's one of the Headphone community's, let's say, premier community members. It's Darth Pool. I hope it's okay if I use your name.
Yeah, that's fine.
And next to him, on the left side, is the one and only Wheezy Reviews. Actually, do you guys want to introduce yourselves a little bit? Like, I've been pointed in the direction of Wheezy Reviews by Metal 571, of course. So that's how I know who you are to some degree. But beyond that, I don't really know all that much. So why don't I'll pass it over to Tyler, and you can talk a little bit about yourself and who you are and why you're into headphones.
Yeah. So basically, for me, it was got into it with video games, of course. How it started. Had a kid and needed to have a quieter setup for not waking the family, and then went down that wonderful rabbit hole of higher and higher end headphones and equipment and gear. So that was my kind of path, and then randomly was invited to the forum for headphones, forum.headphones, and just kind of found a home there. So that's kind of how it kind of grew from there. And I just love to sit back, relax, and get some whiskey or some rum and chill at night. And that's my kind of my peace or zen area right there, is to listen to music and have some good headphones.
But you're also, just for those unaware, Darth Pool is also a reviewer on the headphone community forum. So there's a lot of the stuff that goes through the community preview program. Tyler gets his hands on it and puts together impressions, reviews, written content, and so it's there's lots of written material there from Tyler, and photos as well. He's the photo specialist for Instagram.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm mostly. So for as far as the review piece goes, I'm not. I take a further step back than, like, I leave it to people like Andrew and yourself to basically do the technical piece, and I go more of the how does this thing make me feel, and go into like I call it stream of conscious reviews, where I'll just throw on headphones and just start typing as I'm listening to music and what it does, and it'll contradict a lot of times as we go, but that's just the joys of having that kind of a stream of conscious review or impression that I like to do, because it feels more real for me.
Yeah. Hey, what's up, Metal 571? Somebody said,
never mind,
yeah.
I'm out. No.
Oh, he's gonna watch later. Okay, so no worries, no pressure then. Somebody called you Darth Purple. I like that.
Yeah. Gotta keep it
Must
real.
Be. Oh, I thought it was from the what was it? It's the Verite clothes that's purple.
Yeah. I can go grab them real
Sure.
quick.
Meanwhile, so sorry, Wheezy, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I've been doing YouTube now for about 6 months. I really, it's kind of for me, the whole YouTube thing was really an outlet for creativity. That's what it is. Like, I felt with my daily life that I didn't have this outlet for creativity, and like, I play guitar from time to time, and I'm one of those guitarists that plays for like 3 months solidly, then doesn't play for 2 years, and then plays for 3 months solidly, and then just like never getting good enough to, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I made a few gaming videos on a different channel, and when I was doing Let's Plays, it takes like an hour to do a video, like an hour video takes so long to upload that I've only got DSL here, so.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it takes me like 18 hours to upload a video. It's crazy. So like, if my video was an hour long, it just takes me like an entire day just to upload it. So I thought, okay, well, that's not going to work. And I thought, well, I love headphones, right? Love headphones. And I wanted to do like another channel as well. I wanted to do kind of two, like a gaming channel and a headphone channel. And I thought, well, maybe I should learn a bit more about video editing because I didn't have a clue. Maybe I should get a little bit more experience and know what I'm doing before I start. That's why I thought I'd start with the gaming. But then I thought, hell, just go straight in there with the headphone reviews, review what I've got, and then just see what happens. And I've just been churning out videos for the last 6 months on audio related topics, really, because like audio stuff is my thing, not just headphones, but seeing as headphones is mostly my thing, I've kind of just focused on that, really.
This is all sounding eerily familiar. It's exactly how I started. Well, minus the DSL stuff, but yeah, I've now started this new channel, but previously that's what the old channel was about. Well, it wasn't just that; it was a whole bunch of random stuff, but it was just sort of, it gravitated towards headphones. Because that was the thing that it feels like that's something where even if you're not an engineer or a professional, you can still provide experiential information that people are going to find valuable or useful, because it's one of these things where you can't try everything, right? So having more impressions out there was just a good thing, and ever since then it's kind of just gravitated more and more towards that, and now here I am with a headphone channel. But I wanted to ask Wheezy, so is this something you do like full time, or is it just sort of on the side, or is it just for fun, or what's sort of how do you see the content?
It is kind of a side thing, but it's also a full time thing at the moment because I'm currently out of work.
Okay.
I've been working in IT for years now, and I was a bit burned out on that. And that was one of the catalysts for me starting YouTube. Really, was that I was so burnt out of IT, and I just needed to do something different, something creative, something to just I don't know, reset myself, just concentrate on things that I enjoy doing rather than things that were just soul sucking, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And that's why I started this channel. And obviously because I haven't had any work for the past few months, it's been a bit difficult because this is really expensive, this whole YouTube.
Yeah, it is. It's a bit of an investment.
Yeah. I mean, when you consider that, you could drop £200 on a pair of headphones and that's a cheap pair, just to review it. Yeah. But I figure I'll get past Christmas and a New Year and then start looking for work again. So it is kind of a side thing, but for the last few months, it has been a full time.
A nice break from the soul sucking type of stuff, I imagine.
Yeah.
I actually really enjoyed your videos on those. I think it was one of the news ones you had was really good about that, where you're talking about that a little bit, and it was pretty cool, and I fully appreciated it because I recently am in a similar situation where I was like, okay, I'm going to take a break from work because this is just too much. So I was like, yeah, on board 100% with that.
Yeah.
Nice.
I wanted to ask about the DSL thing because so you're in the UK, but is there a reason why it's only your internet speeds are what they are, or
the internet is so spotty in the UK?
Is it?
Like even in London, even in the center of London, you can struggle to get a good internet connection. I don't know what it is. You've got to be lucky to live somewhere where either you have cable or you are on that street that's been upgraded to fiber to the cabinet, or I think they're just rolling out fiber to the premises on a larger scale now as well, which is good. And apparently my address is one of those that might get it eventually, but we could be talking 10 years. I don't know. But my property is actually what they call an exchange only line, which is connected directly to the exchange because it's only like 500 meters away. And that means there's no cabinet. So they can't upgrade the cabinet. And they're not allowed, for some silly rules, they're not allowed to put the fiber to the cabinet equipment in the exchange. So there's no way to upgrade it until they actually come along, dig a tunnel, dig a trench, and put some fiber in.
There's literally nothing you can do. That sucks. It's just for reference here. Tyler's in. He's near Seattle, right?
Yeah, near Seattle. I was actually joking with Andrew earlier. I was like, this is almost a bad joke. It's a Canadian, a Brit, and an American walk into an audio shop, right?
Something like that. Yeah, something like that.
Bar.
Yeah. So I actually have some questions here. We might as well go through them. But so one of the things that we were just talking about this earlier before we went live, but one of the things that I appreciate about, both of you guys have actually, it's a different approach to headphones, but I find that there's, at least from Wheezy's reviews, the ones that I've seen, there's a lot of emphasis on going on the journey with the audience, with people. There's a lot of, it feels like there's a lot of learning and then explaining. Is that part of your process? Is that kind of how it works?
Who is that to first?
Sorry, to you, yeah.
Yeah, because, well, I'm a mid-fi guy, right? Because that's what my wallet can allow. And
well, just wait until you get more famous, and then suddenly.
Well, the most expensive headphone I got, the DT 1990. That's I love this, but yeah. So I buy a headphone, and then I just see if I like it, and I listen to it. And I think the first thing, I was actually going to do a video on this. What is my review process? But first thing I do is I just put it on and I listen to some music, and that's it. And I just use it like I would normally. And if it was an IEM, I would put them on and go for a walk. So if I was going to go down to the shop, I would just wear those and just use them as I would normally, and see what the experience is like for someone who's just going to buy them and put them on and do the exact same thing. And I want to know if it's going to work for me as much as, is it going to work for other people, and how does it compare to something like this that I've already got or have experienced before. So I put it through all that usual normal day-to-day use. And then I go and I do my listening tests and I do the measurements and things like that. And I've got my playlist of a bunch of different tracks that I then sit there and I get my HD6XX and I put them on and I listen to that. And then I take those off and I put whichever headphone I'm reviewing and I listen to the same thing and I make some notes. And then I get another headphone that is very similar. So like when I was doing the K371s, the what I consider to be a top-notch closed-back monitoring headphone would be the DT770. So I had there's 6XX there as my reference, my standard that I have all the time. I have the DT770 in there as my direct comparison, and then I've got my K371s, and I'm just A/B, and I'm just taking them on and off, and then I'm just doing that, and then I start to write my review. And this is another thing, goes back to the creativity thing that I was talking about. Like, I quite like to write, but without any sort of real reason to write, I don't write. So this has given me a really good reason to write. And I've actually got a blog which is kind of like a companion to my channel. And all of what I script out for the review on YouTube gets put onto that blog as a written review as well.
Oh,
and that's pretty much my process.
Yeah. I didn't know you did the written stuff as well. If you want to fire me that, I'll drop it in the notes later for everybody to check out as well.
Yeah, it's Wheezy.Reviews.
Yeah. Because that's actually, for both Tyler and myself, that's been a huge part of it, is the written component. It's been the primary focus for, at least for me, for a lot of it. The video stuff is, in my mind, it's at least as far as like the litmus test for when I ask people what kind of stuff do you prefer, most people actually say that they really enjoy the written stuff because they can go through it whenever or wherever. And I find it's often when people are looking for a specific thing, say it's the DT 1990 or something like that, and they're looking at all the different impressions and reviews that people have, um, they're able to take that keyword and then make the most use out of it, because they don't need to be necessarily in an environment where they're watching through a whole video. They can skip right to the things that they care about the most. Whereas if it's these, longer videos, and sometimes people, they're not in the best environment to be able to make sense of that. But then on the flip side, I also don't know about the YouTube audience all that much. And because again, I'm not a, it's funny, I wouldn't describe myself as a YouTuber. I describe myself as a headphone reviewer who happens to, as part of that, make videos about the different headphones. So that's something that's super new to me as well. I don't know, Tyler, what are your thoughts on the written versus video?
Yeah, I actually 100% agree. Like, I feel like the videos, I think for me personally, it's I enjoy them for the ability to, I can scrub through them too, But at the same time, I think they're more entertainment, if that makes sense. Whereas I look at more of the and it gives you also that connection with the reviewer also, so I can actually then listen to what you're saying and view your face to see like that human interaction, and get that is this reviewer someone that has a similar sound profile that I like, and then that's how I would go off that. But then I take the written reviews as more of the kind of like the gospel, I guess, or like the thing that kind of is the more final like, thing that you'd want to really dive into and read into.
Well, it goes back to the way that Tile did it. I mean, I think there was a lot of people who only saw his videos, but most of the information, like 90% of the information, was actually in the written piece. And actually, I remember discovering the written reviews and going, oh, this is actually way more entertaining because he's really funny in the written reviews. And I think for people, if they'd only watched the videos, they would have missed the best aspects of what he was putting out there. I wanted to ask actually about so you, Wheezy, do, I mean, as you mentioned, the more mid-fi stuff, let's say. But is there an intention to at some point go up, higher up to some of the higher end stuff, or how do you feel about that? Because for me, I've gravitated more towards the higher end stuff because that's just what I personally get excited about. But I'm starting to realize that there's a ton of value in the mid-fi stuff, or the best bang for the buck or best value kind of stuff, that I almost wish I could do more of, because I feel like that's what a lot of people want to see. They want to know, how does an LCD1 compare to a Hi-Fi Man Sandara versus a HD6XX versus a Bayer Dynamic or whatever, right? What are your thoughts on that? Excuse me.
I'm open to reviewing, as much high end stuff as I can get my hands on. But realistically, it's out of my price range at the moment. But also, I don't know if I can justify spending a couple of grand on a headphone.
Oh man.
I mean, I probably would if I liked them enough. Do you know what I mean? I'd find a way to justify it. But there's so much gold. Yeah, there's so much gold in the mid-fi space that I think it's easy to just overlook it and go, well, this is better out there. But there is so much good stuff in mid-fi if you know what to look for, and you're smart with how you spend your money, and wait for the sales and things like that. You can get some absolute bargains in the mid-fi region, like the HD 599, which I paid £90 for, which I just can't get across to people enough just how good value that headphone is for that price tag. And to go from something that costs you £100 to something that's going to cost you £1,000, it's a massive jump. And I'm quite happy in mid-fi. I'm because my wallet can then spread a lot further. Then I can try lots of different flavors. I think this goes back to the video you did the other day. Was it today or the other day? I can't remember. Last night about having headphones for lots of different things. And because you do eventually realize that unless all of your headphones are, I chase the Harman target because I find it works for the most of the music that I listen to. but
Yeah.
I appreciate that sometimes it's not quite right. And I've got the DT1990 and the HG6XX, right? They're two very, very different headphones.
Yeah, extremely different. Yeah.
And they complement each other so well because, one type of music is going to be really great on one and the other on the other. And also, I think if you've got several £1,000s to spend on headphones in a year, 2 years, or whatever, you can probably get a lot more tastes, a lot more flavors with your money in mid-fi than you could do. You could get one really good flavor, sure, if you spent it in the high end, but you can try many more things with that money. I think that's why I like mid-fi so much.
It would be. I think one of the reasons why that sounds a little, it's almost a little bit counterintuitive for headphones specifically, because you're only ever listening to one at one time. So there's a little bit of weirdness there where it's like, if you have like 5 headphones that each cost, between $200 and $300, or I don't know what that would be in pounds, but something like that. It feels a bit odd because you're like, well, I'm only ever using one at one point in time. What's the point of all the rest? But I really do think that, again, I tend to agree with that idea of the Harman curve is a good idea. But it's still something where if I listen to, again, it's my jazz music that doesn't do well with Harman. And it's specifically pianos. I find it's just too dark. And it's partially also because of the bass shelf, and that's what makes me wonder about some of the testing methodology that was done in order to get the Harman curve. I wonder what was actually used, because I feel like the type of music that you listen to has an influence on what sound signature you're going to prefer. And if it was just piano tracks or jazz music or something like that, that does a little bit better with something a bit brighter, or maybe something that doesn't have the bass shelf that the Harman target does have, I wonder if people's preferences would have been different, because that's again one of the things that actually even I was just asked that today about. There's this idea of neutral that everybody seems to think exists in a scientific way, but I really don't think that it does. I think it's something where we have that idea because you could measure a speaker in a room and put a microphone in front of it and it'll measure flat on a frequency response. And that's supposed to be what neutral is. But the reality is, even in that situation, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the best for all the music that you're going to listen to. Because, again, all microphones aren't, perfectly flat either. And the mastering and recording for the music that you're listening to isn't perfectly flat either. So it's just like there's so much within that to unpack, that I don't think it can be reduced down to this singular definition or unified definition for neutrality. And so when there's this idea of a deviation from neutral, that it's somehow bad, I think maybe not always. I think it's, as you pointed out, it's just different flavors for different types of things. And actually, I was thinking about this. It's like, given that there are all these different target curves, and there's different versions of the Harman target curve as well, you could potentially have multiple different headphones that you could call them all neutral, even though they all sound totally different.
Yeah, and I think SonarWorks as well. They did some very, very similar research to Harman and came up with their own curve that is very similar to Harman, but it's again very slightly different again. I think Sennheiser did something very similar once, maybe back in the 90s, wasn't it?
Yeah, so Sennheiser, this is the way I understand it. Both Beyerdynamic, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on this if you're in the chat, Metal571 can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but from my understanding, Beyerdynamic and Sennheiser were both doing some research on this kind of stuff, but they weren't doing preference curve research necessarily the way that AKG was, or I guess that's Harman research. And so they weren't asking the question they weren't asking the same question. They were instead trying to figure out what would be the closest to sounding like a speaker, a flat measuring speaker in a room for a pair of headphones. And so what Sennheiser ended up coming up with was I have no idea why think this is true. I don't know if it's actually true. But Sennheiser came up with what they called the diffuse field loudness equalization, which is what the HD 800S, actually is the original HD 800 is going for. And then and it, you know, was trying to, again, emulate to a certain extent that speaker like kind of thing. And for those of you guys who are unaware, diffuse field would be a little bit warmer than free field. Free field is like if you have an anechoic chamber and you're playing, and you're in your you have a measurement there of something in an anechoic chamber. If it's diffuse field, it's not quite as bright as that. Diffuse field is brighter than Harman, but it's like in between. So, and there's different versions of diffuse field. There's the Mahler one as well from like way, you know, years ago, who were doing similar kinds of things. But in general, my feeling was that Sennheiser's research was trying to be more scientific about getting a headphone experience to be like a speaker experience. And I think that the Harman research is more consumer preference based. That's at least how I understand it. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. Things are falling? You all right there? Speaking of mid-fi, we have the RAL requisite SR1A over here.
Yeah. I was referencing the headphones as speakers because I don't believe those are headphones. I think of them as near field speakers.
Yeah. So on the subject of headphones and speakers, I mean, I've always, I mean, both of you guys can weigh in on this, but I've always thought of the headphone listening experience as something that's unique. I've just lost the chat. Sorry, 1 second. There's the chat window. Okay. Yeah, I've always thought of the headphone listening experience as something that's unique to speakers, and better for certain things because of distance and crossfeed. Because if you're sitting at a distance from speakers, again, I love good speakers too, but if you're sitting at a distance from whatever sound source, whatever the transducer is there, at a certain point, it's gonna cross over, right? So you're getting an experience that's the combination of your different transducers. With headphones, that's not happening because they're isolated, and it feels like that's a more it's easier to identify the details and get more surgical as far as the actual specific things that you're listening to. And it might not be as technically accurate as the artist or engineer intended because they're mastering the stuff on speakers to get that stereo imaging thing right. No, not that many people do that on headphones, but the idea of then listening to it on headphones, I think that, I mean, it just imparts such a totally different kind of experience that I think that's one of the reasons why I've gravitated towards headphones as well. It's yes, partially because I could get away with better sound quality for less money, but it's primarily also because of how unique that experience ends up being. And I also wanted to ask you guys. So I'll ask you to comment on that. But I also want to ask you guys about. It seems like these days, a lot more material is better recorded for headphones. And I wonder if that's partially a sign of the times for people, again, not having the space to be able to have speakers. And people are, I guess, studios are recognizing that more and more people are listening on headphones. It's actually probably more common to listen on headphones than speakers, you know, if you think globally at least. I get the feeling that maybe they're recognizing this and then specifically producing music that has stereo imaging that's better suited for headphones. And then maybe this can go even further. Anyways, I'll let you guys, you know, weigh in on that.
I think it's also just because of the nature of like the current creator's mentality too, you know, like I think that's a big piece of it where it's also way more mobile. I mean, you can get a kid with a laptop and an audio interface or something like that and some basic microphone stuff and they can start making music on the go. You know, I think that's a big part of it too. And they're using headphones.
Right. They are primarily using headphones as their own tools.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna. Oh yeah, over to you, Wheezy, on that one.
Wasn't sure if we finished there, but I kind of lost my train of thought. But yeah,
like for instance, like I'll kind of pick up on that, Wheezy. Like your video where you're playing your guitar and both the electric and the acoustic, like that's awesome, you know. And people like that you can then technically, if you wanted to, you could make an album that way, you know, with just that kind of scenario. I think that's part of it.
Yeah, yeah. I think these days, uh, I mean, when you're making a track, you want to. They always say you should test it on other systems, not just your studio monitors. Like if you've got a really good room, and that's the other thing. Go back to speakers. Most of the time, when you listen to speakers, you're not listening to speakers. You're listening to the room. So
Yeah, yeah,
you've got to have a good room that's acoustically well set up. If you don't have an acoustically good room, then you'll be listening to the room probably more than you're listening to the speakers,
yeah,
and that adds a certain color to it that you're never going to get that on headphones. You're just going to get the pure, raw, unadulterated music as it was made.
mm-hmm.
And I think because it's that much more intimate, and this is why mastering engineers use headphones to pick out flaws. Because it's that much more intimate and that much more detailed, and it's isolated. You can then just listen in, and I think that's why I think people get the wrong impression about professional headphones as well. People aren't mixing and mastering on headphones. They're taking the headphones, putting them on, and going, "Oh, there's that noise that I was looking
Yeah,
for," and then they're fixing it, and then they're taking the headphones back off, and they're mixing on speakers.
yeah,
But when it comes to making sure that their mix translates right, they have to then go and take that mix and then play that on a pair of earpods, play that on a
yes,
pair of
yeah,
Beats, play that on whatever it is, and just make sure that it actually translates okay. Because it might sound good in their acoustically perfect control room on their acoustically perfect speakers. But if it then sounds like absolute trash on AirPods, no one's going to buy that album. So they have to make sure it sounds good on all this stuff that everyone uses.
yeah. I remember I was gonna say that's what the DT1990 is for.
Yeah, yeah.
You specifically look for the issues. I was gonna say so years ago when I was way younger, my friends and I had a band actually, and we ended up recording an album. So and we were in this recording studio recording the album, and realized that the guy who was doing the the engineering or mastering or whatever, his equipment for playback wasn't particularly good. But the thing is, I remember that he's like, well, yeah, this is because that's what it's going to sound like on like most people's equipment. But then when I actually heard the mix on good equipment, I thought, this sounds terrible. I mean, obviously the music wasn't very good either, but because we were amateur musicians. But I also thought, that on good equipment, this does not sound good at all. On bad equipment, this sounds decent. This sounds like every other recording that even well recorded stuff, right? So, and that just makes me think of this just sort of other tangent, that I don't know. I have this approach to this kind of stuff that for the music specifically, that if and maybe I'm wrong here again, but if music that let's say isn't as popular as the popular genres right now, if people listen to that, like well recorded versions of that, say well recorded jazz or well recorded classical music on really high end equipment, whether it's speakers or headphones or whatever, I feel that they would be able to enjoy that type of music more, because they'll actually hear the things closer to what it would be like if you were actually there in reality, like if you actually heard those instruments playing, and it would at least give a better chance of them potentially being able to enjoy it. Obviously, if somebody doesn't like it, they don't like it. But I often feel like on the Beats of the world, or the AirPods or whatever, that type of music isn't really properly being given a chance for the mass consumer audiences who gravitate more towards popular genres. And I was trying to think of reasons why, and partially I think it's because of those bass elevations where they are. If you're not listening to music that takes, again, full advantage of the full frequency range, then you're limited at, like, let's say 80 hertz. That's where it ends. Maybe it's a little lower than that, but probably not much. And so if that's where the bass bump is, for all the music that you're listening to, the modern genres that have a ton of extra bass because they're, for whatever reason, say it's electronic music, EDM or whatever, or same thing for the high, same thing for the treble. If the modern genres are, again, maybe a little bit more compressed, they have an easier time of sounding good on a wider range of equipment. And that's, again, maybe I'm completely wrong about that, but that's my hunch, at least. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
I'll punt that to Wheezy.
I don't know. I think there's a move away from over compressing everything these days, and thanks to the LUF standards.
That's a good thing.
Well, yeah, that's a really good thing, and I think streaming services might be partially responsible for what is really like gonna mix the industry up a little bit more. I think because all this brick wall mastering that we had back in the Oasis days, where everything was as loud as it could possibly be, and there was no dynamic range whatsoever. I think it's about time we got rid of that. Went back to having dynamic range in music.
The loudness wars are over, thankfully.
Like the console wars. Well, not really. Those are still going.
They're all plebs anyways. PC Master Race. What's that?
There it is.
PC
Master Race wrist pad.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
That's from the subreddit, I think, right?
Yeah, I believe that's how it started. Yeah.
Yeah. Just sort of getting back though to the whole question of headphones versus speakers. I mean, do you guys like, if you had a choice between a ridiculously good speaker setup with a decent room, I mean, as you're saying, Wheezy, most of the time you hear the room, but say the room that you have is decent, and pick a speaker setup for $5,000. Would you rather have that or a headphone setup for the same amount of money, like full systems, everything, if you had a decent room for the speakers?
Ooh. Does the decent room for speakers also include the neighbors who are absolutely happy for you to blast the music as loud as you want?
You're in a field. You have a room in a field.
The neighbors happen to enjoy all the same music that you do, and at the same times that you want to be listening to it. That's
a really good one, because it's a completely different experience. I don't think that I could say, you don't get the same energy from a headphone that you do from speakers, that raw bass energy that hits you in the chest. There's something about that's probably one of the few things that I can probably say I wish you could get that experience from a headphone, but
I just have Metal 571 here next to me and punches me in the chest every time there's the sub bass that kicks in.
You need one of those vest things.
We lost your video there, Tyler.
Oh yeah, one sec. But anyways, you need one of those vest things. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. It's like like those old like video game controllers that rumble. You can have like a There used to be a headphone that did that, like way back in the day. It was like it looked like a Cos Porta Pro kind of, but you could get it and it would go behind your ear, behind your head, and it would like vibrate the back of your head whenever there was like crazy bass going on as well. So you get that visceral impact. Once we get your feed there back, Tyler, I want to ask you about the SR1A, because so I did have a chance to hear it thanks to Tyler, who brought it to a meetup recently in Seattle. Hey, there we go. And we put it in at
we're dead.
But basically what happened was so the SR1A, for those of you guys who aren't familiar, that's in many circles considered to be the absolute best, like the pinnacle of a headphone-like experience. I mean, it's more speaker-like than headphones, but as we'll talk about. But it's still a thing that you wear on your head, and it looks like a futuristic device You'll see it here in a second. Uh, but in many circles, this is considered to be the best experience that you can have, and I find it a little bit interesting and also a little bit strange, given that it's much more like a speaker-like experience than a headphone-like experience, and since. So when I was trying it in Seattle, we put it in a sealed off room, so there wasn't, because it's very, very open, and we put it in a sealed off room so that the conversations from outside weren't intruding on the listening experience. And there he is. He's wearing it now. And
claps way out and make yourself look really awesome.
Yeah. See, I worry more that. Yeah. Wow. Okay. My biggest fear with that is if I was listening to it and my girlfriend walked in the room and she'd think I'd joined a cult. She'd be like, "What are you?"
Cyberman, dude. You're good.
Yeah, exactly. I've become a spaceman. But so when I tried it out, when I tried the SR1A out, I was not as impressed as I thought I was going to be. And I think I know why. I think it's because I was expecting it to be a headphone experience. When I was looking for those qualities that I'm used to with headphones. Like, for example, when using a Focal Utopia, you go, whoa, the detail is just crazy here, and the speed and everything. And if you're used to that kind of presentation, and you're able to really appreciate the pinpoint imaging and surgical precision for the imaging and instrument separation, all that stuff, and then you go to something like the SR1A, where it's not like, the experience is so much more like you're sitting in front of near field monitors, and so it's way less about that, and it's way more about the stage quality, and that's something that I still I have yet to really figure out and understand properly. And that's I think it's worth exploring a little bit more. But I always wonder, like, to me, there's always still a question mark with, do we really want our headphones to sound like speakers? And what do you guys think about that?
I'll jump on just because I have the SR1As. So I actually had for a long time I think the same as you, Wheezy, the JBL 305 Mark IIs. On my desk. They're just massive, and my desk it's pretty crowded. I like my little toys and my other stuff, and I have a lot of amps, and I'll just do it. It's a mess right now, but I'll do a quick. Also because of the stream, so I'm not stream related, but I mean, you can kind of get an idea. Like, so I'm using the edifiers now, but I mean, I have the Bifrost, the SR1A Jotunheim, and then my listening rig over there with
headphone.
I have the headphones sitting right there too, and then all my other fun stuff. But anyway, so like with the JBLs, they just took up so much room on my desk. Oh, there you go. That it was kind of difficult to really appreciate them, if that makes sense, because I was constantly just like, and I had them against the wall, and they just didn't have the same functionality that I would like. And at the end of the day, I always listen to headphones. So with that, I think personally, I like the headphones better, just because it's more personal to me. Like, I was going to mention back to what you asked the question earlier with Wheezy, was like, for me, I think of speakers as more of the like a social thing. If that makes sense. Like you with speakers, you have it's very social. You're sharing an experience, and it has more impact. And then with headphones, it's more of that. It's very personal. You can get a more emotion. I mean, you get emotional with speakers too, but I'm saying, like, for me, like, you can get into a quiet room, have the headphones on, and you can just kind of focus in and get real focused on the music, because it's in your head, or it's depending on the headphones you have, but it becomes a more personal aspect of listening. And so that's kind of my take on the speaker versus headphones.
What you just said there makes me think of what Steve Guttenberg was saying about when you're listening to headphones, you're getting the truth, but you're getting it as if your head's in a bubble. And that's where the sound's coming from. I kind of like that description, but I'll let Wheezy chime in on that.
Not sure I got anything to add on that, really. I mean, I have monitor speakers because, well, I do make a bit of music from time to time. Not good enough music that anyone would ever want to listen to it, but I make some music from time to time. And also, it's actually pretty good for checking my audio when I'm doing my video editing as well, actually. But like, for the most part, because I live in a flat, and because my room is not very well acoustically treated, I'll never listen to music on these. Uh, yeah, it's headphones all the way. And do I want my headphones to sound like speakers? I don't know if I do, to be honest. I think um, I think if it could just sound natural, like whatever it is, whether I'm listening on speakers or whether I'm listening on headphones, if it can sound like the instrument is being played in the room that I'm in, then that is, I think that's the ultimate goal, really,
Yeah.
is that it sounds like it's there. And I don't think really, not all the time at least, I don't think speakers really do that for me, because it's so like, it's it doesn't really surround you like at a concert or anything like that, where the music is everywhere and it's just, it's huge. Speakers at one end of the room blasting sound towards you. It's so directional. It's similar to headphones in many ways. It's still quite intimate compared to actual live sound. And I think if we want to, I think headphones that sound more like the live experience rather than sounding more like speakers is probably where I would like to see. That's what I would prefer to see.
I really like that description, because I mean, I think you're absolutely right that when you're listening to even like the like amazing speakers, like actually I was listening to some of Andrew's
those focals.
Holy moly, really really nice speakers. I still get the feeling that what I'm listening to is the best representation or reproduction of what's been captured by a microphone. Whereas if I'm listening to headphones, it sounds like I'm in the room with the musicians. That's the distinction that right. And maybe it's not as concert-like as the speaker presentation would be. Maybe it's, or you were describing things as being, a certain distance back. But I think I think if that is the end goal, to make it sound like you're actually there, like say you have a decent room and it's just like your musicians are like in like conversation length away from you and you're just hearing, I mean, again, it probably depends on the type of music that you're listening to. But yeah, I love that description, because I've always had that issue with speakers, because it feels like that's not as easily captured for the ultimate goal with speakers as it is with headphones. Speaking of music, what I wanted to ask, like, what type of music? You said you're a musician, Wheezy, but what kind of music do you like to listen to, or what kind of music are you into, even as a musician? Yeah, what's your take on that?
Should I give a cop-out answer like I listen to everything?
Have you recorded anything like that?
If it's good, I like it, right?
Yeah.
I tend not to listen to like generic pop stuff. Like I just can't get on with it for some reason. But I'm mostly into punk and metal and grunge and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I'm a 90s kid. Well, I was born in the 80s, but I used to be flat out into Nirvana and stuff like that. So I like a bit of electronic music as well, Dead Mouse, stuff like that. And
yeah.
I also find myself listening to probably more than anything at the moment, because I find it so relaxing. And I do like to have music on as background. Like I'll listen to the stuff that I really enjoy, like the rock and the post rock and stuff like that, with my headphones on when I really want to just listen to music. But for the rest of the time, I'll probably be listening to some lo-fi college beats, like that's so popular on YouTube, the chill hop, yeah, all that sort of stuff, just in the background. And when I'm wandering around doing my shopping and I've got my earphones in, that's the sort of stuff I'll listen to. And so as long as like I'm quite forgiving on earphones and stuff like that and portable audio, because as long as it can play that well, I don't care what else it sounds like.
Job, right?
Because I'm not listening to other stuff when I'm out and about and walking around. I'm listening to something that's just going to chill me out and stop me from, having a rant at somebody out on the street for just stopping in front of me or whatever.
So it's more like a tool for survival, for other people's survival.
I appreciate that a lot. Similar thought on audio and gear and everything like that. Everything has its special place, and if it's a transducer and it makes noise, it's doing its job, right? Just a matter how good it does that.
But for you, I mean, you could listen to the lo-fi beats on the SR1A and see how that goes.
Actually, it's funny. I game on that, and I've also I'll listen to Spotify all the time, and like I'll do because it's. I mean, yeah, there's certain tracks you'll definitely hit that wall, or you'll hit the certain parts. You're like, oh, that's not that great. But at the end of the day, it still sounds good. It's still a trend. It's still making music. It's still it's just might convey some of the flaws more. But I mean, at the end of the day, it still sounds good to me. I mean, I think, but yeah, like for right now, like my main listening is probably the Verites and the SR1A, and then on the go I use the Andromeda Gold. So that's one of my jams for that kind of stuff. And then actually BGVP, is it BGVP? The DMGs?
Yeah.
Android turned me onto those, and those are my gym headphones, man. I put a little Bluetooth little neck dongle thing on them, and those things hit, man. They have some really good bass. And, I mean, like you said, Wheezy, like I'm not at the gym trying to like nitpick a concert. I want some bass. I want to get going. And so that's, there's a place for everything, I think, in that respect to headphones. Like I don't think there's any one specific headphone that will do everything well, if that makes sense. I think there's some that come really close. But I think that's the reality of it is they all do specific things or along those lines really well or whatnot.
That's what I actually really liked about the AirPods Pro. It was like I wasn't expecting it to be very good because noise canceling. I always find with ANC headphones, even in the best of cases, you get the artifact burble for treble, and it's the same kind of thing that you get when, say, you have a audio recording or audio track that you're trying to that has a bit of noise in the background and you're trying to denoise it, and you run it through one of these programs that does the denoising, and it's effective at doing that, but it makes the treble sound like the high, anything in the highs, burble, or this sort of like kind of almost like muffly metallic kind of sound to it, or muffly kind of like electronic noise artifacts that show up. I think that's just the nature of noise canceling in general. But with the AirPods Pro, yeah, that's there, but when I was using it, I found that it was so useful for all those applications that when I wasn't intending to listen critically for anything, even honestly, not even for music enjoyment, for just like listening to podcasts or something, or even conversations as a audio tool, it was. I mean, maybe that should be the name of like a YouTube reviewer, the audio tool. But but yeah, as something that was like a device that made it so that my life was easier. It was amazing. And I gotta say that the noise canceling thing, it's grown on me, like the experience of using noise canceling, even just like while out and about, it's grown on me to a point where it's made me think about, like, I worry a lot about my hearing and my auditory health. Just partially because I'm listening to headphones all day, but I would be doing that anyways, to be honest. I would be, even if I wasn't reviewing headphones, I would be listening to music on whatever headphones I had all day. So I don't think it would really change that, but making sure that I'm not losing my hearing is super important to me. And I notice that even when I'm outside, when I'm not wearing headphones, I'm just walking like in the city down the street, it's loud out there. It's actually like you hear, truck brakes and bus noises and everything. And when you're listening to, and when you have the AirPods in or something like that with ANC, I actually think that there are like auditory health benefits to that kind of thing, because you're not in the din of the hustle and bustle all the time. Even if, the only real risk there is that
Being hit by a car.
Well, yeah, there's that. But I mean, the risk to your hearing is playing it too loud. But that's the thing that I noticed, is that when I was using IEMs on the go, like real IEMs on the go, maybe like not these ones specifically, but like the wired ones, I would. There was always a risk that you'd want to turn the volume up a little bit more because there are, uh, that those low frequency kind of hums that intrude on the music that you're listening to, and it crowds out some of the detail. And then you go, okay, I'll just turn it up, which essentially raises the music above that noise floor. When you're listening to something that has ANC, at least for most environments, that's not as much of a problem because you don't need to turn it up. And so for like hearing health and auditory health, I actually think that's like the AirPods Pro are one of the best things, one of the best choices to go for. And I think it's like to me, it's the kind of thing I would want to use all the time while out and about instead of some of these ridiculous high-end IEMs that I love to use. I think those are more like, at least for me, my use cases, I think those are more kind of like office things where you're on the go somewhere and you're going to work that day, and you get to the office, and then that's when you plug in your high-end IEMs, and then away you go. Whereas the actual like going from place to place experience, I found that the AirPods Pro were remarkable for that. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. That's just me ranting about stuff. But for anybody wondering, for my music choices, it's typically jazz and acoustic music. By the way, I've mentioned this before that certain, even just the last video that I was doing, certain types of tuning are better for jazz and certain types of tuning are better for other genres. I don't want to loop jazz in with classical music necessarily for those tunings, because I think that there's something with jazz that doesn't happen with other genres as much, and it's that you get this overly warm and syrupy kind of tone to jazz, and that's to do with both the instruments that are being played, but also the point of the music is to be relaxing for a lot of it. So obviously there's some experimental stuff that's really not relaxing at all, but a lot of it is that sort of like, there is such a thing as smooth jazz for a reason. It's because people want that kind of like warmer, kind of syrupy, less fatiguing kind of sound. And then when you use headphones that are particularly bassy or warm sounding, it's the doubling down effect just muffles the hell out of everything.
Makes it muddy, doesn't it?
Exactly, yeah, and it muddies it up. And I find that when you brighten up, I mean, somebody was again asking me this earlier, but when you brighten up, when you use a slightly brighter headphone, again, I use the Sundara or those hi-fi men planers for this, but it'll give clarity to those areas that are already a little bit warm. So it's like counteracting and counterbalancing a little bit. And then the flip side for music that tends to be a bit more aggressive, I find that's where I more gravitate towards the warmer stuff, because I do listen to, I'm a bit of a metalhead as well, at least I I was for a long time, rock, punk, metal, that kind of stuff too. So actually everything you're saying, Wheezy, everything you're saying, it's eerily familiar. Everything from getting into it, into the hobby, from the gaming side of things to being a amateur musician, to, at least in my case, I was let's say failed musician. Tyler, do you play any instruments or
instruments? No, I drum my fingers, I whistle. I never had that bug, but actually the thing I always wanted to learn was piano. Piano was the one I always wanted to learn. That was my I love piano music.
That's the best one to start on, because
so actually I was actually looking at doing that, like starting like just learning, And so I also figured out what the problem with the camera was. I think I have it on a timer, like a shutdown timer. Obviously, I'm not a YouTuber, so I haven't set it for. So anyway, so if I lose it, I'll just restart it. But yeah. So that was not a music person, but I actually grew up. My dad was a huge music lover, huge collection, and then my stepmom was a traditional bassist, but she also did jazz, bluegrass, concert, symphony. Rock, everything. I mean, you name it.
But so you had like instruments around and like hearing music, live
music constantly. Like it was so funny. Like I mentioned where looking back, I was such a little turd. Like I had this wealth of knowledge and wealth of like experience that I was just like, oh, they're playing their music again. I wish I hit my hip hop or my, you know what I mean? Like, looking back, it's like, God, what kid got to go to concerts every weekend or got to go to live music shows every weekend?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, they're dragging me to another bar or dragging me to another symphony or another. It's like looking at him like, God, I wish I could just slap that kid, like.
Yeah.
But there's definitely those aspects where it's I think it's funny. Like I was constantly surrounded by music growing up. Like it was just the nature of growing up in that realm, I guess. And so it's funny. I didn't really come back to music until I got into the headphones, to be honest. And I always, you listen to music all the time with like Wheezy, you kind of get it. Like you were mentioning, like you just throw them in and you're doing your day to day. And I did that all the time. Like I was, but I was listening to, Skull Candies or like, like, nothing fancy, nothing. It was like 10-15 bucks. And if I lost them, I was like, whatever. I think I was super stoked. I started running marathons when I broke my wrists. And so I was running marathons. And so like, I was so stoked because I got the Bose Sound Sports or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, and I was like, oh, music is so much better now. And it's like, I think it was crazy. Like, but yeah, I think that's kind of how I feel about it, to be honest.
And having that reference point of I see somebody in the chat talking about reference points, but I think if real live instruments and knowing what that sounds like, I think if there is a reference point, it should be something like that. And then that's always what everything is sort of evaluated against. But actually, I want to. You mentioned the Skull Candies. I want to find some of those cat ear headphones and then like review them and put them on the ears rig and see what happens. I keep getting these emails from people who produce them, and they keep wanting to collaborate with me, and I'm tempted to take them up on that because I think it'd be a ton of fun. But also, I have a friend who, well, basically the headphone sound quality doesn't matter. The only thing that actually matters is what they look like. So they have to be pink and they have to have cat ears. So I figure I'll just borrow something like that and then, drop it on the ears rig. I have a ton of headphones, like not me personally, but like people around, like people in my family. They're headphones that they keep saying, because they know I do this review thing. They keep saying like, "Hey, can you review these or measure these to see how they do?" And it's like that will not do well. It's like one of them is like this sort of half broken on ear thing. I think I have a Grado up there somewhere, and actually these ones. This is I've already opened it up, but they're in the box now. The Bose, Beats, and it's the same thing basically. The Beats Solo 3 wireless is going to be the next review that I'm going to be doing, and the thing is though, like everybody sort of expects that to be bad because it's like it's kind of like the meme of the serious audiophile community. The enthusiast community. That Beats are terrible, but I think wouldn't it be cool if it turned out that they were actually good, which I'm not expecting them to be, but it would be really funny if I always like finding those little counter narratives and counter contrarian ideas, and if something like the Beats Solo 3 is actually any good, I'm super skeptical, but I think it would still be cool. Actually, it's an on-ear, so I'm bound to hate it no matter what, because on-ears shouldn't be a thing. Yeah.
I wanted to jump in real quick. Pro Falcon had a question regarding. So his question is, what do you think causes the biggest rift between reviewers and their audience? Is it the wonky audiophile vocabulary, personal preference, or that there is no standard headphone gear used as a point of reference? I'm not a hardcore reviewer, but I'll just do real quick. My opinion of it is more as a filthy casual, is that it's that there's if there's an incentive, I guess that's a part of it. But incentive's not really that big of a deal to me as long as they're just being honest. Like you can Andrew, you're really good at this. Like it's hey, if this isn't good here, then and I mean, I think that's a big part of it. And same Wheezy with your reviews. I was watching your reviews, the same thing. Like as long as you're just giving your opinion, you're honest about it. If there's an issue, but at the same time, also like both of you guys are really good at this, and I try to do as much as possible whenever I have that come up. Is you highlight the negatives, but you don't need to be a like, excuse my language, but like this is bad, but jerk. You know, you don't have to be a jerk about like
Yeah.
what you're saying. You know, you could say make it constructive or make it. You know, you don't have to be like, oh, f this. This made my ears bleed and they're hot garbage. Or, you know what I mean? Like there's someone put a lot of time and effort into that product, even if it is a big company. But a lot of times, most of these hi-fi companies are not that big when you actually look at it.
Oh, a lot of the stuff we're reviewing, yeah, a lot of it's like boutique, super boutique
stuff. Yeah, like so. I mean, when you look at it that way, it's like poured their heart and soul into this thing, and some kid's gonna come along and just be like, oh, I've heard someone taking a crap in a stall sound better than this or something. You know, I mean, I'm being facetious, but like, you know, like it's not really constructive. It's not good. And so I think that kind of stuff is you need to be real cautious with, for my opinion. I think that would be the disconnect for me.
For me, the disconnect is there's a number of things, but I think like if we're talking about disconnect as in like the inability to constantly communicate what we're thinking about headphones as clearly as we want to, and everything is basically just boiled down to a video that has a start and a stop, and you can't really, it's harder to have that kind of like full dialogue like you would with just a person in conversation, even just like we're having right now. That's why like I try and actually comment as like respond to the comments as much as I can, because people will have questions. But I think the biggest disconnect, if there is one, is that for the most part, I think we have certain understanding of how target curves work and how, and again, it's that in my mind, it's that idea of neutrality and what reference should be and all of this, that I feel like I often run into this issue where I'll be talking about something in a video, and while I'm recording the video, I'm feeling good about it. I'm feeling like, okay, this is going to be, people are going to get what I'm talking about. And then I go to the editing stage and I edit the video, and I realize I've assumed way too much of the audience, and I haven't been specific enough about and break it down enough into as simple terms as I should. Because I realize, even when showing measurements, for example, if I show the raw graph, well, obviously the ears rig raw graph is not good anyways, but if I show the raw graph for something, even if I pull it from somewhere else and it is accurate, somebody's going to think that should measure like a flat line, because they don't understand that a raw graph needs to be compensated. So stuff like that, if I take it for granted that my audience knows this, I'm failing. I'm alienating a lot of people there, because the bottom line is that most people probably don't know about that, and maybe the ones who are specifically following audiophile reviewers, headphone reviewers, maybe they do know about this, but it takes a long time to not only build up the experience with different equipment and different headphones, but to understand the way that things are supposed to sound. And then looking at how that translates visually to graphs and measurements and stuff like that, I worry that the overly technical side of stuff that I often find myself going down the rabbit hole of, because I just enjoy learning about that stuff, I find that often is the thing that it's the hardest to communicate in a bite-size 10-minute segment, or it could take an hour for one little topic, and then that it still needs to be a review about something. So in my mind, the biggest disconnect, at least for me, is assuming that everybody has the same understanding for reference curves and neutrality and the way that, so for example, the way that the pinna and the concha and the head shape and in the ear canal and the eardrum, the way that all of those different gain factors affect the way it sounds and the frequency response. That's something that, it's even taken me a long time to properly understand that stuff. And just it's a matter of going down the rabbit hole a little bit more, and reading more and learning more. And I can't expect that everybody's done that. But that's one of the things I like about Wheezy's content and his reviews, is that he's very good at breaking that down into simple terms so that people can understand it. And so I'll let him answer that question.
Yeah, thanks for that. Mostly it's I've got to break it down in simple terms for myself, so it's
yeah that helps, I imagine.
Yeah, I think part of the job, isn't it, when you're doing a review, is to try and make it relatable, because it's when we go through all of this learning ourselves, because it is sometimes really quite complicated, and it takes us a long time to understand it. And I mean, sometimes we're making videos where we're getting stuff wrong. I'm sure you've probably felt the
I've
same
done
thing.
it. Yep.
Where
I've removed videos.
Like I can look back at most of my videos and go, right, I didn't like that. I didn't like that. I didn't like that. In fact, I'm quite hard on myself. I since I've been doing this, I'm going to just release a video, whether it's perfect or not. But I try and get the actual content right. But sometimes I don't always get it right in a way that it can be understood. Where like, oh, I'm trying to hint at something, but it didn't quite read that way in the replay, even though I've said exactly what I wanted to say. But like, I've left some ambiguity there, and I shouldn't have done. And that's kind of led to questions like, oh, why did you say this? It's like, well, can you not read between the lines?
So yeah, reading a comment afterwards and going, that's what you took from this?
Yeah. And also, but back to this question about audiophile vocabulary. You touched on this in a video the other day, didn't you? And I'm guilty of this myself as well, where I have used certain terminology differently in some of my videos, and then later used them differently. Like dynamics, that was one that you brought up. Dynamics is an annoying one, because when I think of dynamics, I think of dynamic range, and I think about variances in dynamic range and how quickly it can change between like loud and quiet and things like that without any kind of weirdness happening. But also I can understand why you mean by dynamics being slammed. So it's like, I guess I've used both terminologies with the same word, and maybe we need to, be more specific about that sometimes. And yeah, it's all part of the learning process as being a reviewer, I suppose. But
that's actually Max Setting's fault. It's not his fault, but I'm going to blame him anyways. It's because he uses the term dynamics only in reference to the punch or slam quality. But before even throwing around these terms with a lot of the people on various discords, and even within the community on Reddit and everywhere else, before even bringing any of that stuff up, I always was thinking of dynamics in that other sense, right, of the gradations for volume, right? And I even in one of my videos talked about it as gradations for volume, because I do think that's still a thing. But I think it's different, and maybe I think we need to not use the term dynamics to describe the slam or punch quality. Maybe that's just the bottom line. But it is an issue when one person has a certain idea of what something means, and then the audience doesn't think of it the same way. But yeah, I'll let you continue.
I think
I've done this.
I've
done the same with the word sweet. Sweet tends to mean a slightly recessed vocal that doesn't sound harsh or anything. But I've used the word sweet on a few of my reviews where they've not been recessed; they just don't sound harsh, and that's what I was getting at. But I hope that it doesn't come across as they're recessed, because that's not what I mean. And sometimes I have to be careful with the way I say things, and maybe only use the word sweet when I'm talking about recessed vocals. And I don't know, but and also to go back to another point about criticizing stuff, that is always difficult, because especially, and this has only happened to me once so far, especially when you get given a product, You don't want to just go, this is absolute hot garbage. What the hell were you thinking in making this headphone? It is trash. Pull it from sale. And let's be honest, they're not going to work with you if you do that. So you need to be tactful with the way you say it. But sometimes being tactful is seen by some people as not being honest. And
Yes.
that's a bit of a problem, because then you're getting people calling you a shill. It's like, well, actually, I criticized this, and pretty much the only good thing I said about it was this. And read between the lines. I'm not going to sit here and go, this is absolute trash. But, you know, I put all the evidence out there for what I think about it. Even said, hang on, I don't really like this sound signature, but maybe if you like jazz, I'm sure it'll work for you. And I probably shouldn't say what headphone that is now after what I've just said. But yeah, actually, because I'll go back and say, do you know what? Jazz is an interesting beast. Charles Mingus and what's the gypsy guy with the guitar? Django Reinhardt.
Oh yeah.
His stuff on a headphone that doesn't have too much bass but has a good amount of forwardness in the upper mids just sounds amazing. And if you don't listen to that kind of music, you won't understand that actually some of these headphones that sound absolutely garbage on your music sound absolutely perfect on that jazz. So maybe I was too harsh, actually. Maybe I was too harsh on the X2HRs. You know, I mean, I reviewed them and said, I don't like how bright they are. They're not just bright, because I can deal with bright. I got Beyerdynamic headphones.
Yeah.
But it's peaky, it's grainy, it's sharp, and it's piercing, and it's like you're being stabbed in the ears with knives.
Isn't it also
but
bassy?
at least the bass was good, is what I said. But actually, then I had a few comments saying, "Oh, these are really good with jazz," and I thought, have I made a mistake? Should I have listened to more jazz on them and then said, actually, do you know what? I can see this might be a jazz headphone. I don't know. Maybe they got too much bass for that. But yeah, there's lots of, there's so many, like, there's so many ways that you can alienate people by accident. And yeah, those two reviews that I'm just talking about, I think I could have done them better. Let's be honest.
Hindsight 2020, right?
Yeah.
I was going to speak on two things actually. The vocabulary piece. There was actually a big long forum dialogue about this specifically. I think one of the ways we've gotten around it on the forum, anyways, is that when we do mention it, and if we catch it, that we say, "Oh, I'm using the word sweet." I'll put in parentheses, "This is what sweet means to me in that moment." So sweet can mean different things at different times and different moments. But if I clarify and put in parentheses like, hey, this was sweet because of A, B, C, and D in that specific song or in that specific moment or with that chain of audio gear, and then move on, then I use sweet again in another review, but then I do that again by saying, hey, this is what I meant by the sweet part, or this is what I meant by peaky, or this is what I meant by the dynamics. I think that can help. It adds a lot, but that's where it goes back to the written review that we were talking about before too, though. Like, I think that's so much easier to do in a written review, or when you're on video or you're in this kind of scenario, you can't exactly like go, oh, pause, this is what I mean, you know. So
maybe we should, though. Maybe that's like the answer.
Yeah, it could be like, or maybe just a quick little like quip, like, hey, sweet, this quick, and see if you can find it real quick. But I mean, that's I found that really helpful when I remember to do it. Or if someone calls me out, you know, I'll be like, oh, that's what I meant. I'll go back and I'll try to find the song I was listening to. Kind of something that Martin was mentioning. I try my best to at least mention the songs I'm listening to while I'm doing my reviews. That's why I like the stream of conscious ones, because I'll literally just put the song and I'll write as I'm I'll type up what I'm hearing as I'm listening to it, unless I get lost and I'll lose a couple tracks and just get lost listening to music. But that's usually how I would approach it, and that's why I enjoy doing it that way.
I think it's also important to recognize that, like, I mean, reviews are just the way, like, yes, there are objective points that we do focus on, but like where it's just, you know, the measurements and stuff like that. But it's okay that, like, if we experience something and we report on it and we give a certain impression of it, and then maybe we weren't paying attention to something that we should be paying attention to. Like, I don't feel that it's all that bad to be wrong. I feel like it. I mean, there's a certain responsibility, of course, and we have to report our experiences honestly and everything. But if we revisit something a week later, spend more time with it, listen to different tracks, listen to things that maybe it was better suited for, listen to it on a different system, then there's absolutely a possibility that, oh, that first initial report or whatever it was, that's not the way that I feel about it now. And so, like, that's one of the reasons why it often just takes so long to do reviews as well, is because you as a reviewer, that's like the worst feeling, is if somebody points something out and you, oh man, I wish I'd tried it with this or with this and in this environment. And because the last thing you want is to be wrong. But I mean, the reality is that we're all fallible, and it's possible to, exactly. But that's also one of the things that I like about the frequency response measurements. Obviously, wishing that I could have them be more accurate than the mini DSP ears rig. And actually, have you guys seen Crin's new setup for measurements? Basically, for the audience, what he's doing is he's using at least as far as I understand it, he's using the mini DSP ears coupler, which is behind me, or the rig, and then he's using the in-ear coupler for IEMs. And because the biggest flaw with the ears rig, one of the major ones, is the inner ear, or the ear canal, is not accurate to what it's just a hole to a microphone. There's nothing there. But when it's hooked up to something that's specifically being designed to measure IEMs, you have at least this is in my mind. I'm super interested in this idea. I mean, I don't want to. Nobody wants to spend multiple thousands of dollars on industry standard equipment. But if something like if it compares reasonably well to some of those, like the Gross or the B&K stuff, it'd be really interesting to do as kind of like a, I know Wheezy was interested in the DIY solutions for measurements, but that, I mean, as far as I can tell, I mean, it seems like that would be a DIY solution that could almost compete with some of the industry standard stuff. Obviously, I don't think it'd be perfect, and you'd still need to do a little bit of smoothing there, because it won't be 100%. But the idea of combining a generic outer ear, like Pinna Concha system, like the silicon piece of the ears rig, with an in-ear coupler that's meant for measuring IEMs, even though they're both going to be imperfect to certain degrees, they're both, to get together for over-ear headphones, more accurate than the one without. What do you guys think about that? I mean, have you seen it? Or am I just am I talking nonsense?
I've seen a few things that Crin's done measurement wise. He used that Dayton microphone when he first started, didn't he? With this little piece of PVC tube, and put his IEMs in that. I'm actually considering doing something like that myself, because the mini DSP is garbage when it comes to doing IEMs.
Yeah, but it's the worst. That's why I don't do it anymore for IEMs. Just don't.
Well, I did a video on this the other day about the measurement rigs, and I mean, it's if that works, using a proper it's a proper, I forget the numbers, the standardized
the IC whatever compliant. I can't remember the numbers either.
He's using that proper standardized coupler, and combining that, instead of just like some random measurement microphone, combining a proper coupler like that into some kind of homemade flat plate, or even not a flat plate, but using some kind of silicon ear, that's got to be tweakable and workable. That's be interesting to see if it can be turned into something good.
There are two things that that I worry about a little bit with that. One of them is that I don't know how you develop a compensation target for it. Like you have to make that yourself as well. because if you just use, I mean, you could probably start with the one for the ears rig and then just modify it to, better incorporate the inner ear coupler part. But the other thing is, like, we don't 100% know where that is. I can guess. I think it's around 4.5 hertz, but it's unclear to me how that would necessarily affect. I think it would take a lot of testing to make sure that that part was right to develop a compensation curve for it. But then the other thing is, if we compare the results of that in the best case scenario, say you measure, I don't know, say you measure an HD 650 on that and compare it to something that was done on a Gross head and torso simulator, and you line it up and you match it perfectly, and you get it so that it looks the same, pretty close to the same. What I worry about is that doesn't necessarily mean that other transducer types will measure as accurately. So, or distance to the pinna and concha, right? That can also have an effect. Or angle of the driver, right? The Focal headphones all measure with this bizarre, like, because they have angled drivers. On the ears rig, they have this weird artifact that shows up for all of them that isn't there on more standard rigs or industry compliant rigs. And so I worry that even if you do match it perfectly with one type of headphone, that doesn't necessarily entail that it's going to match perfectly for all the other types of headphones, because you still have to deal with distance issues and transducer types and angles and all of that. So you'd have to constantly be checking against what other measurements are out there for the same headphones. And then at a certain point, if you're constantly doing that, I wonder what the point is, because you'd always need that other reference point. Because in many ways, one of the things I love about doing measurements, or the idea of doing measurements, is that I could measure headphones for I could provide measurements for headphones where no measurement exists, right? Yeah. And that was exciting for, like, the Headphone when we first got it. I mean, that was like the first time that somebody had a measurement of it. It was obviously an imperfect measurement because it's on the ears rig. But it's exciting because that's the only measurement of it that exists, right? Before it got to some of the other, I know Jude published his, I think. But being able to get something that's accurate for stuff that, there's no other way to, visually represent that information, that's exciting to me. And so that's why I'm looking at what Crin's doing and I'm going, I want to do that, or something like it.
What about the guy that does the ones where he does the in-ear microphones for, obviously for
Olive?
But yeah,
I think that's another interesting way to do it. The one, this is a minor issue with that. I think it's probably going to be more accurate than the ears rig. But the one issue, because again, he's using, for the most part, his own ear canal, right?
So it's going to be unique to him.
So first of all, yeah, the issue would be that it's unique to his ear. But at the very least, you can get a sense of how he hears it, right? And that's super helpful. But the other issue is that, and I don't know 100% if this is going to be an issue, but I imagine it would be. Part of the ear canal gain factor is also the eardrum. And if you're using microphones inside the ear, you can only go so far. So I imagine you're still limited there for the inner ear, not the inner, but for the ear canal. So it won't perfectly get the gain factors that you want, or accurately represent them. But I think it would still be, like, I think getting an IC, whatever that number is, compliant in-ear coupler would still be more accurate for in-ears than somebody putting microphones in their ears and then measuring it that way. But I still think that doing the in-ear microphones in the ears is more accurate than the mini DSP ears rig. And that's also something that I'm looking into. I'm trying to figure out what would be the least cumbersome solution for that. And part of me feels like it is what Olive's doing, just because it's very quick. But in any case, what do you think, Wheezy?
Yeah, Olive's I've seen his videos that he's used that. He's got a really thin cable so that it doesn't cause any issues with the seal, stuff like that. I haven't looked looked at it too closely, but um, I don't think it's the microphone's not like properly in the ear canal, so the ear canal's probably not in the equation. I think it's like an earplug with the microphone on the
Yeah, that's what it
outside.
looks like.
Is that right?
So again, I'm not 100% on how
You can
it's
get them
being
from
done.
Amazon. Yeah, this they're like little microphones. He literally slides it into your ear, and then you put the uh your headphones on afterwards. Sorry, it's
I
resetting my camera.
the yeah. Okay, but in any case, it would still be missing the ear canal gain factor and the eardrum gain factor.
So it's getting the human ear, the pinner.
Getting the pinna and the concha correct, but it's at least to his ear, right? But it'd still
Yeah.
be missing the whatever the gain factors are. And like looking at that old, I mean, I don't know 100% where the ear canal and eardrum gain factors will amplify, so which frequency range. But um, looking at those older graphs from what Tile was working on, where he showed where the gain factors occur. Again, I don't know if those are accurate, but if you compare that to the Mini DSP ears rig, that one of them is right where that it's actually a little bit higher up. I think one of the artifacts in the ears rig is a little bit higher up than where that ear canal gain factor occurs. But you could also, in theory, devise the compensation curve to account for the fact that the ear canal and drum resonance gain factor is not applicable. But then it just means that whatever you're using there is inaccurate no matter what, and you just have to ignore that section of the frequency response. But I think most people are probably doing that anyways. Getting untechnical again here. I think we've kind of gone down the rabbit hole a bit. Al Besher asks Darth Pool why is the SR1A so controversial?
My camera's been weird, but for I saw that comment in the thing. I was gonna see if anyone wanted to talk about it, but for me, like it's controversial because I think everyone expects it to be like this. You know, it does a lot of things where it comes as close as possible to speakers, right? So like that's or it has that perception, anyways. And so I think that's where the issues come into play, if that makes sense. So sorry, I'm trying to reset my camera here a little bit too. There we go. So with it, I think it's also expensive. It uses speaker amps. You know, like it uses things that aren't the normal setup of things. Um, it's I don't know. And on top of that, I think it really at the end of the day, it's just because it's not like anything else. You know what I mean? Like
It looks pretty crazy.
yeah, it looks crazy. I mean, it's using technology. It's using ribbon technology. I mean, to me, if you were looking for something that is, if you like HD800s, for instance, right, or like something just a detail monster, or like a sound stage in imaging where it hides nothing, like that's what this is. You know, like I think that they marketed it after, you know, portable studio type work, which I think I'm not a studio guy. I mean, I like music, but like that. I think to me though, that's what this is. Like it's pretty amazing set of headphones. I wouldn't call them headphones personally. I don't think of them as headphones. I think of them as near field speakers that just go on your head. So I call them the near field speakers. You know, like I
It's
think
like it's like holding two boom boxes on either shoulder.
yeah, like really, like they're not like I wouldn't. That's why I have a hard time comparing. People compare the instance, not as in the headphone, and I don't think it's a fair comparison, even though they're both kind of similar in degrees, but they're not, and because like kind of goes back to that you're talking about the way your ear canal shaped, or your ears are with the SR1A. It actually is a more natural way of sending that sound wave to your ear, right? Like so it's sending it in that way rather than headphones, you know,
Right, because it's doing it at a 45-degree angle.
Yeah, or even
because
wider,
they're
depending on how you do the
yeah
flat.
yeah.
I mean, it's it's not a fair comparison in my opinion, and they do things differently, and I would say they're the closest thing you're going to get to a near field speaker system on your head, and to me like they're perfect for like an apartment living, or if you're
yeah.
uh, or if you are like a mobile studio type person that you'd want to have something like that. Like that's especially with the
Mm-hmm.
new Jotunheim R. Like it's so portable now. It's crazy. Like you went to Seattle.
Yeah, that's what we
It's
used. Yeah,
it's crazy. Like you can just
it's,
literally set up and have a computer in that thing, and you have essentially a little portable I mean, the sound quality wise, and they are controversial also because so many people praise them, right? So
yeah.
and like you said, you didn't necessarily like them. I don't think Andrew or Taryn necessarily liked them that much either. Like
Well,
um,
I didn't dislike them. I was thrown off by them because I think I was expecting something that they are not intended to be.
and that's I think that's the other reason is
Yeah,
that right there is people are expecting them to be headphones and
yeah,
they're not like I in my opinion like they're just
yeah,
not they're a different beast.
yeah.
Um, so there's that and I think yeah like that first initial listening to them too like I when I first listened to them I was like I get it they're amazing but at the same time I wasn't like but I have HD 800s or I have the Focal Clears or
Mm-hmm.
like but then after like and you kind of mentioned earlier too is like having them in hand and having them readily available to me and listening to them consistently all of the time and then you go back to something else like a clear or an HD100. I think that's when you really start to see the difference in a headphone and or any gear actually. Like if you think of it like immersion, like if I immerse myself in only this one headphone and only this chain, right,
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
a week straight, and then I went, okay, well now let me go back to a headphone that I used to listen to just for all the time, like my standard headphone that I listen to all the time. And I put that on, and I'll instantly be able to go, well, this is listening to that same track. I'm picking up where
Yeah.
this does this differently than that one. Like you'll be able to pick it up more. I think a lot of that's brain burn-in. I think that's a thing that people don't realize a lot of times too. Is like you get acclimated to your source that you listen to all the time, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when you put something new on that you're not used to, your brain will tell you that's not right. Like it doesn't. It's not the thing that it doesn't sound right.
It's the
Um,
normalization. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's normalization. So when you put that into perspective, I think that's where it needs to come into play. Like where the controversy comes into play for a lot of
Mm-hmm.
actually even reviewers, for instance. Like I think that's a big piece too. Like you need to kind of think about that a little bit too. I mean,
Need to
like
spend more time with it before. Yeah, that's why I
yeah,
didn't want to say. I didn't want to say whether I liked it or not because just from that one experience of listening, I was thinking, that's not enough. I need to spend more time
yeah, yeah.
to do that. I just wanted to go through a few of the questions here in the chat, and maybe actually everybody, if you guys have questions for any of us, I do want to ask a few things from you still, Wheezy. But first, maybe let's get everybody to ask questions in the chat, and I want to address a few of the things that I've been seeing here. Somebody says that asks if Harman tuned the mini DSP ear. So I'm not sure about that, but the one thing that I do know is that for the mini DSP ears rig, you generally have for over-ear headphones, you have two compensations. One of them is the HEQ compensation, which is based on the Harman target. So if you want something to measure close to, if you want to represent something the way that it would compare to a Harman curve, that's the HEQ compensation. And I do show that a lot for headphones that I think are like the Harman target. So for example, these ones like the LCD1 with the Reveal Plus DSP plugin, I like to show the way it measures up with the HEQ compensation because that demonstrates better its linear qualities relative to that Harman target, because that's one of the things that it's known for being good for. But the one downside with that is that given the rig's inaccuracy, well, there's two issues with it. One of them is that because the rig isn't perfectly accurate, you even with the Harman compensation that they're using, you wind up with less accurate results for even with that compensation. And then if you compare across other measurement rigs, like for example Tiles, what Tile was doing in the past. So there's a huge database there of all the measurements that were done. Those weren't done on anything that has that compensation in it, or even something it's not using a compensation like that. That's closer to what Mini DSP has for the HPN compensation. And the HPN compensation is what a lot of reviewers will prefer to use because it's the one that is going to be a little bit more accurate. So it doesn't, and it's where it gets a little bit weird, because you want to show that a headphone is linear to the Harman curve, but you also want to show that it's accurate. And for accuracy, you would use the HPN compensation. But then if it is actually a headphone that matches the Harman curve, it'll look like it's not accurate. It'll look elevated in the bass, and not as it'll measure warm essentially. And then if you compare that again to some of the older measurements that Tile was doing, most of the headphones for his compensation curve, they also measured warm. So that's why he just said, I don't pay attention to that. I just look at the I look at the raw graph, which we can't do with the Mini DSP ears rig. So, it does take a little bit of understanding of what that rig does and the compensations being used. But I think as long as we specify which target curve is being used, which compensation is being used, whether it's HEQ or HPN, that should be good enough, I think.
I always put that at the top of my graph so that there's no ambiguity there.
Vicky Loves Headphones says, I have a Mini DSP ears, or Mini DSP. If Harman did the tuning, they did a pretty poor job. So that's the issue, is that it's not about whether or not the Harman curve is a good curve. It's that rig is just not accurate. And when you're using the HEQ compensation, you're trying to get it close to matching what a Harman curve would be, but don't think that that's actually the Harman curve. It's based on it. Okay, let's go through some of what folks are saying in the chat here. Okay, so let's go through a bunch of headphones that are our favorites for. Okay, let's start with the mid-fi closeback headphones. I'll throw to Wheezy on that one.
Should I say K371 that I've got on my head? I think technically the K371 might be one of the more better. Is that?
Yeah.
But honestly, I cannot stop loving the GT770 Pro. It's just got the right mix of qualities to it that makes it a absolutely fantastic headphone. And maybe I wouldn't listen to too much music on them without a bit of EQ, but they're super comfortable. If you break them, you can replace any part on it. Not that you're likely to break them because they're literally bomb-proof. Well, maybe not literally, but and just whether I think you spend, probably I do anyway, spend most of my time wearing headphones, not listening to music. I'm watching YouTube, I'm watching Netflix, I'm playing video games or whatever, and the GT770, I put them on my head and this is so nice. I don't want to take them off. That's why.
What's the impedance on that one?
These are the 250.
250s, okay.
Yeah. I know that the 80s are probably a little bit more exciting because they've got a bit more bass, but
isn't that
I
also...
like the cord cable, so
isn't it also that you get with the higher impedance? Like, I know that there's because I used to have the DT880. I think I had one that it's like 600 ohms. I think there was a higher one as well, and with the higher higher impedance values, you ended up getting better performance because you didn't have to make concessions for the voice coil. At least that was my understanding. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. But when you when you made the headphone more efficient, it became less technically capable as well. That's why I was asking about which impedance one it was, because I also, as far as I understand it, the higher impedance ones are increasingly more rare because most people they didn't want to have amps and DACs and stuff like that. They didn't want to have sources that could power them, or that it was required to power them. And they ended up just buying the more efficient ones, which in my mind is, for the enthusiast, that's a bummer.
Thing is, the 80 ohm and the 32 ohm, they're the same sensitivity. So it's not exactly like even the 80 ohm is easy to drive in the grand
Right,
scheme.
right. Yeah.
You know, I think you're better off using an amp with any DT770 that you buy.
So does the
I can't use
DT770
it on my Focusrite interface as a monitoring headphone because it
right.
just doesn't have the juice to drive it.
Does the DT770, is there a 600 ohm for that one, or is it only just the 250s?
There might have been a pro version. It was a
Oh, maybe.
facelift, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
was it? I think there was one. I think all the theirs have a higher level.
Yeah, I remember there was the older ones, like the
Yeah,
originals.
the older ones, yeah.
Yeah, there was always that tier. Okay, Tyler, what's your favorite mid-fi closeback? And you can't say the Focal Allegia because that's not mid-fi.
Mid-fi, close back. Tough. Close back mid-fi. I would have to go with the Fostex, honestly. But they're semi-open, so it's kind of tough. Like the THS.
This one right here behind me.
Yeah. The TH series. I think those are probably the ones I'd go with. As far as, I mean, I have my Purple Hearts back here. Yeah, I think that would be the one I'd go with.
Yeah, mine too. That's actually my answer. For me, it's the Ebony. Actually, I was surprised because I got at that Seattle meet. I got to compare the Ebony and the Mahogany, and the Mahogany is way lighter. It's like, it felt like it was like 100 grams less, even more. Like it felt like it was like almost half the weight. So I don't know what's going on there. But actually, I like it because it's the first like headphone where I could say, oh, it's my favorite headphone was actually that Denon AD2000, the older one, and I used that even when I had like. I had hi-fi men planers, Odyssey planers, and I always loved that Denon headphone because it was way more comfortable than any of those other ones. Of course, everybody knows I'm a bit of a necklet, but and I love the pads and everything about them. And then when these guys, this is the drop version, the TRX00, I think that's the one with the removable cable, and that's the only thing that really changed. When that came out, everybody was all about that, and I never bought one back when they the TH stuff, but my friend had one, and I remember I'd always borrow his headphones. I'd always be like, can I use your TR or THX00 Ebony? So that was when I first kind of fell in love with that series. But I'm gonna move on to another question here. Someone says, is the LCD1 any good? This is from, I can't say that name. Is the LCD1 any good? There was a lot of hate for it on one particular channel. Yeah, I actually did a review of the LCD1. I don't know, have either of you guys heard the LCD1 yet?
I think I had I did hear it. I heard it at the Seattle meet, I think.
Yeah.
It first impression, literally like a minute.
Yeah.
It wasn't. It goes back to what I was saying before. Like I can't give a valuable assessment of it at this stage. But I mean, my right off the bat, like I can say though, for me, I can put a headphone on and I'll know more or less instantly if I'm gonna like it personally. And it's not my thing. But I'm also not the biggest planar guy, so probably the wrong person to ask. Which that's another thing. Like some people just don't like planars, or ever. Some people are planar guys, some people are dynamics, some people are IEMs.
I think the LCD1 is a good subject though because so Wheezy, have you had a chance to hear it?
I haven't. That's one that I really, really want to get my hands on. But yeah, one day.
If Odyssey is at any point watching this, send this man all of the headphones.
Yeah, right.
All of them.
All of them. Yeah, just
please.
get him out, have him review everything. I want to hear what his opinion is of the LCD4. Yeah. That'll be a lot of fun. But so, are you comfortable doing a little bit of EQ to, like, say, using Equalizer APO or some software?
I use Equalizer APO all the time, but not very good at making my own EQ presets. So I use, for the most part, and sometimes I tweak them, but for the most part, I use Oratory 1990s profiles.
Mm-hmm. But with that, so the reason I ask is because the LCD1, I think it gets a bit of a bad reputation. I don't know which channel this person is referencing, but I think the reason for that is if you just listen to this with the default tuning without using the Reveal Plus DSP, it doesn't sound as good as it could be. And it's not like it changes a lot, but it does. So for example, the default tuning here, the bass rolls off a bit. Not as extreme as what Ratings is showing. Like it still extends decently far, but it's like it sits lower than the Harman Elevation. And then when you use the and also there's a I think it's around 3K hertz. There's a bit of a bump there with a 2K hertz recession, so it emphasizes the bump. But so it sounds a little bit congested. That's the way I'm going to describe it. You know, experientially, it's a bit congested when I just use this without Reveal Plus. But Odyssey has given the Reveal Plus plugin for free, and they have a preset for the LCD1, and when you use it, it just fixes those little issues. They're not extreme issues. They're very minor, and it fixes those, so it evens out the frequency response closer to a Harman target, pretty close to it. So it elevates the bass, gives it that shelf, and then it actually, like, I find it opens everything up a little bit, and it sounds way less congested. It sounds much nicer, and so my suspicion is that if you're seeing it get some hate, it might be because they're not using the Reveal Plus. It could be. There are two major drawbacks with the LCD1. The first is that it doesn't have any kind of punch. It doesn't have any slam call. It's wimpy. The other drawback is that it doesn't have much for stage. But I mean, it's a tiny headphone. It's the same size basically as the Sign on here. Maybe it's a little bit bigger, but it's a really small headphone. So we can't. And the other thing too is it is a planar. We probably shouldn't expect it to have crazy punch and slam for a planar that is like 250 grams, or however, it's super light. And because it's not double-sided, and it's also, I mean, it's a smaller diaphragm, and you really can only do so much with the space that you have. So if you think about it, if the punch quality or that slam quality comes from the excursive capability of the transducer, you need, for planars, because it's all even, you don't have that, well, not for all of them, but for most of them, it's just sort of a even sheet there. You don't have the luxury in as far as the pistonic motion for the transducer to be able to have high excursive force. Whereas with dynamic drivers, you do, because it's more of kind of like a cone shape, or the shape to it is better suited for high excursion. So in my mind, a lower end super lightweight planar like this that's actually really small and it's portable, I don't think we can ever expect it to have a ton of slam or punch. So I'm not really that bothered by it. But the stage does get to me. So those are the only two real drawbacks, I'd say. It sounds like maybe a little bit more open than a M50X, which is not high praise whatsoever.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's real tight. Now, it sounds
M50X
way better.
Might as well be right inside your ear.
Yeah, it's an in-your-head kind of thing. But, it's a way better tonality and frequency response than the M50X. The M50X, that's a headphone I have no reservations about saying it's hot garbage. They're talking about being jerks, but that's a headphone that...
I've got a lot of opinions about the M50X, most of them unpopular, but...
Oh, really?
Yeah. We can go into that if you like.
Yeah,
but,
by all means.
Yeah, the LCD ones first. The LCD ones, they sound... Sure. And I've only had a quick look, and I haven't really paid that much attention into the reviews that much. I know that Metal likes them, and that's enough for me to want to hear them myself,
Yeah.
But it looks to me like they are a planar HD 600, HD 650 sort of. Is that how they sound, or?
Not quite, because, well, I mean, it succeeds in the areas where the HD 650 is where there are shortcomings. So I'd actually say it's closer. I mean, again, somebody can chime in on this as well, but to my ear, it sounds closer to the HD 660 or even the HD 600, because the LCD one is more treble focused. Like it's actually, the treble is the shining quality of this headphone. So both in terms of extension and in terms of like the perception of detail. And then also better extended in the bass, whereas the 650 is more mid-centric, and it rolls off a bit in the bass, and it's smooth. It's not quite as well extended in the treble as well. So for me, it's closer to the 660S, but I think even more well extended in both ends, and that's really the advantage of the planar driver. Yeah, that's how I see it.
I think there's probably a market for a Sennheiser tuned planar or something like that, with a bit better extension than the HD 650. I reckon there's probably a market for that.
Yeah, my only issue with it is that the Sundara is $50 less and is better in just about all aspects. So, but it's also not as portable, and it's not as efficient, and it's not as, all those other qualities. It's not as small. It's less comfortable for sure. So, it's a trade-off. We were getting at something though.
The M50X.
Yes, we were talking.
Yeah.
All right. What's your take on that?
Well, I find it really weird how, if you go back 5 years ago or 6 years ago, whenever it was it came out, there was so many people singing its praises, and I know MKBHD probably is part of the responsibility for that, but so many people were singing its praises, and now so many people, you can't find anyone who wants to admit that they like them. And like, there's a huge disconnect between those 2 points of opinion, where the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. And it goes back to what we were saying earlier about preferences and things like that. I think the M50X, I can see why people liked it back then, and I can see why I was one of those people that liked it back then. And if you go back that far, especially as a lot of us, the M50X, because I never got in on the M50.
Okay.
I was a bit late to the party, and I didn't really want to get one without a removable cable, so I waited, and then they released it, so it was like, perfect, I'll buy that. And but like, we've come from gaming. We were talking about that earlier. I'm sure, like me, you probably started out with some really crappy gaming headsets, and you've tried loads and loads of different gaming headsets over the years, trying to find one that wasn't absolutely trash, and ended up giving up on gaming headsets, obviously. But like, to go from a gaming headset to something like an M50X, there was a big jump in sound quality. It did sound better than a lot of the crap that people were used to at the time. And it had 3 removable cables. It could be folded up into this nice, neat little package, and you could carry them with you wherever you went. And this is before Bluetooth wireless noise cancelling headphones were accessible. So people weren't buying headphones like that. And so this M50X filled a void at a certain time of a portable headphone with above average sound quality that was better than the average, high street bear and gaming headsets and stuff. And it exploded in popularity because they were all right. But then people started to use them, and they were like, hang on, these are uncomfortable AF. I have to stretch them out so much. I almost broke the headband trying to make them comfortable. The ear pads are just trash, just please. And then they were buying Brainwaves pads and sticking those on them. I tried, and they sound terrible if you do that. They sound absolutely awful. And they started to go out of fashion when people realized, actually, do you know what? There is better out there. But we didn't know there was better out there. But the M50X introduced them to this whole new world of audiophile headphones, or that there was something more out there than the gaming headset or some high street brand headphone. And it put them onto the right path, and they moved on from it. And I think that's why I did a review on them a little while back. It was more of a love letter to the M50X for what it was and what it meant at the time. Is it a good headphone? Probably not. It should be the monitoring headphone that it was designed to be, and maybe people shouldn't have been using a really cramped no soundstage professional monitoring headphone as a casual headphone in the first place, but
Mm-hmm.
you can see why it was popular at the time. That's why I still have a soft spot for it.
It's like the I think a lot of people have used this description, but it's kind of like the Beats of the audiophile world. These days, at least, because you see it all the time, and when you see people wearing them, you go, "Oh, you care about music a little bit. You care about, or you care about sound quality a little bit, because
read it.
yeah, it's elevated them beyond the fashion cans, right? They're not thinking about how it looks; they're thinking about how it sounds at the very least, right? And they do look good. I'll grant them that. But I just mean, like, instead of getting the Beats for the whatever reason, if somebody has an M50X, I respect them more. Because then the person who's wearing the Beats, or at least their appreciation of sound a little more, because at least it's a little bit elevated for the reasons that you mentioned. But for me, with the M50X, the thing, so you mentioned, going from those, not like the crappy, gaming cans, like, it was actually the Denon D1001 that was the first real headphone that I got. A real headphone. It's a small, like, it's the same headphone as the Creative Orvana Live now, but back then it was the Denon. So it's a Fostex driver, but it's the Denon D1001, and that made it so that I skipped the M50X era a little bit. Like, for me, this is like 2006, 2007, and so going from the gaming headphones, which were really, really bad, to the Denon D1001 or Creative Orvana Live, it was like, oh my god, this is so much better. And because that actually is a good headphone. I still think that's a good headphone. And then trying out other people's M50Xs when everybody was, during that time, I still thought, but you know what? I like my Denon better. And so I didn't have that same kind of relationship with the M50X, or that same reverence for what it meant for people who were used to listening to stuff that wasn't very good. Because I just thought, well, why doesn't everybody just get the Denon D1001 instead? It came in, and I think it was around the same price. But basically, these days, it's like, I see it now, and it's a little bit of vindication for me, because I see in wherever it is, Reddit or Discord or all these places, if somebody is asking, should I get this M50X? There's a train of thought that you see there that's very popular that says, no, get the Creative Orvana Live instead. And for me, it's like, even back then, I had but of course I was fortunate enough to end up getting that one instead of the M50X. But it's nice, it's nice to see that headphone, the Creative Orvana, or the D1001, is still around, just in a different form. I think they actually made a sequel to that now too. I should probably check that out at some point. But yeah,
for me, the M50X wasn't like the first, like, entry-level audiophile headphone, or whatever you want to call it. That might be a bit much for some people to say, even that. Mine was the HD 558.
Okay.
That was my first one, but I was looking for a good closeback, and like, closebacks in this price range, there's not much. But it wasn't until I got my GT 770 I was like, actually, this is a good headphone. But I tried several different closebacks over the years, and I was like, they're all garbage. Ugh.
Yeah.
And the M50X was, like I said, it fit that niche at that time, because it was so portable as well. That meant I could just take it to work before I bought my noise cancelling ones.
That's the headphone that everybody uses for, like, field recording as well. They have the M50X, all the Pro, like, just, it's because of its convenience to throw it in the backpack kind of thing, not because of the sound quality necessarily, but for the practicality there. I certainly, like, my old job, my boss would always have them, and I would always make fun of him for it. Then he went and got some Brainwaves pads for him, because his pads fell apart. But yeah, I don't know. I think actually, I think there's, these days, thankfully, now headphones that like, nobody needs to buy the M50X anymore, even for those applications. Although I have to, because I am so focused in on let's say, high end area, that I often don't recognize the price differences for, because I was wondering, like an M50X these days, if you wanted to buy one, it's what, around $100, something like
Yeah,
that.
it's about that, I think now.
Yeah, 150, between 100 and 150, and I think that's now right around what the K360 one is,
Yeah,
something like that.
But I mean, at the same price, you can get a good pair of 6XX, the HE4XX.
Oh yeah, HE4XX, yeah.
Yeah,
But those
like,
are
I mean,
open, right? So
yeah, they're open. I mean, I guess you have to, but then also at that range, I guess how much you are okay with IEMs. I mean, you can go get a 10 hi-fi or like
right.
yeah, what are those, the
blonde.
DMG or the BGVPs? Or
Oh yeah.
you know what I mean? I mean, there's so many in that range that are for IEM wise, or I mean,
well, in my mind, yes. Instead of the M50X, I think that there are a lot of IEMs that like it satisfies the same kind of practicality requirements.
mm-hmm.
It does and it doesn't. Like, I wouldn't wear IEMs at work because I'd be constantly taking them in and out.
Right,
Yes.
Oh yeah, that's true.
What do you want?
My wife, man, when I found the airplane, hey, oh yes, what? Oh, and then you're wearing I'm wearing pop, oh,
It looks like the chat disconnected for some reason.
Did it?
We'll wrap up here in a little bit, but for me the chat disconnected. All right, somebody else can type.
I can see
still,
it. Yeah,
still running.
Okay, cool. Okay, let's see if we can. Let's just talk about headphones. I mean, there's a lot of questions here about different.
People were.
Oh yeah, there it is.
So beautiful. Oh,
so perfect.
Such a beautiful headphone.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you didn't know, I'm a meme of purple. Like that's my thing on the forum.
I got to get some purple cables.
Yeah. Hey.
Just cause. So I did have some. Oh, it's because it signed me out of Google. So I did have some questions about for Wheezy here. While we got him, if you think about 10 years in the future, what is it about headphones that you would look forward to or get excited about?
Oh, 10 years in the future, they're probably not going to change. Well, maybe they are. Maybe we'll see more like planar stuff and more like other weird driver technologies rather than dynamics.
Do you have much experience with planars?
I have the HE4XX, which I know is not a particularly good example of a planar, but
I think it's the best intro to planars you can
get,
honestly, in my opinion.
I was trying to think about that because somebody recently asked me, they're like, oh, I have $200 to spend on headphones. What do I get? And I'm like, okay, get this HD6XX. And they're like, oh, I can't because it doesn't ship to my region. And so I was trying to think, okay, what are headphones that are like entry or mid level headphones, let's say. And I realized I have no idea what those new
entry level? That's easy. Porta Pros with Yaxi pads.
Yeah, you could do Porta Pros, yeah. But so for the planars out there, I realized there's you go from HE4XX and then $200 up is the Sandara. I don't know if there's anything in between that.
I don't know.
I was trying to think,
especially now they've had their price cut, the HE4XX.
Yeah. So really, I don't think you can get a planar less than the HE4XX, but then I don't think there's anything in between that and the Sandara, unless I'm wrong. Maybe there is. I think maybe you could probably find a 400i or something. I don't know.
Maybe on the used market, but I mean
that's what I'm saying. It maybe.
Yeah, as far as entry level audiophile stuff, honestly, I think Drop has the.
They do.
They have the market cornered. Honestly, I
don't
know anything outside of them that has that pricing for that level, anyways.
Yeah. Oh man, I got to try those Porta Pros with the Yaxi pads at some point.
Good. Pretty good.
So yeah, back to that question. In 10 years, do you not necessarily where you think the technology is going to go, but if you think about what you would want to listen to, where would you see that going?
I would want to see more adoption, more widespread adoption of stuff like the Harman Target in headphones. I know
Mm.
that both JBL and AKG are starting to embrace it now, but I want to see it done properly in more headphones. And I obviously not exclusively that. Other tunings is fine, but I'd like to see more of that.
More attention.
That would be good, because I just find it works best for me. It sounds good on most genres that I listen to. It's not fatiguing because it's not overly bright,
Hmm.
but it's not so dark that it removes all the detail in the high end. It seems just right for me, and
Yeah.
yeah, I'd like to see more of that. So then you don't have so much guessing. But then we might be in a territory where everything starts to sound the same, which might be a bit boring.
Well, then
Maybe.
we just then now are evaluating the like strict technicalities, and we're not thinking too much about the tonality anymore, which would in a way be like, I think that would be interesting in a different way, um, because I mean, for I realize that for most of the headphones that I evaluate, or even headphones that I'm potentially interested in buying for myself, I end up EQing them to something basically like a Harman curve anyway. And really, at that point, I'm just going, well, okay, can it handle it? And if it can, then it's evaluating how well does this perform for everything else. And that's when, like you hear like, well, we were talking about the Utopia versus the Headphone. Tyler and I were a while ago. Or just everybody in the forums talking about it. But
Yeah, the headphone, man.
yeah, but the headphone. I mean, both of those are brighter than the Harman Target. They're actually more suited for jazz music, and they're more suited for, again, not necessarily just
I mean,
that
these
stuff,
things are
but
also.
they're
Let's give some people an
yeah,
idea of how big these things are.
yeah. Get the two bricks on the side.
Oh yeah, I saw a photo of that the other day. They're massive, aren't they?
Yeah,
You want to talk about embarrassing yourself
yeah,
around
yeah,
your
yeah.
significant other?
That reminds me of the Beyerdynamic DT 100s, 150s. In many ways, that shape of
Yeah.
that headband and the way that it sits on your head.
But yeah, so I forgot what I was talking about. Oh yeah, so those two, I'm pointing this way because I have the other monitor here, but the Utopia and the headphone, they're both brighter than the Harman Target, but you can EQ the headphone with a bass shelf to get very close. Like, it's still a little bit brighter, so it actually matches my preferences like almost like perfectly. But it does require that like 80 hertz bass shelf boost by a couple dB, like 2.5. But then it's like, once it's there, all of its technical performance is so addictive. It's like, I don't know if I would probably enjoy that more than the Utopia, the sound of that more than the Utopia. And that goes to say a lot, I think. But getting back to the Harman curve, yeah, it's one of the things that I really like about it. I think if everything were tuned to the Harman target, for those of us who, I mean, I'm fine doing a little bit of EQ and just using a profile for different genres. My fear is just that most people aren't doing that, or they won't feel comfortable doing that, or they won't even be in an environment where it's possible to do that. I realize that a lot of, especially a lot of the older crowd, I think they're not necessarily listening at their desks or at computers or with iPads. They're listening in living rooms with CD players or even high-end CD players or streamers, right?
Tape decks.
Yeah, hopefully not. But so they're in totally different environments, and EQ just doesn't make sense for those environments. And so that's why what I worry about with, if everything is tuned to the same frequency response, whatever it ends up being, that we just don't have the extra flavor to potentially switch up and try something for different genres.
And I think that kind of goes into another thing too. Is like you have like ZMF, so they have a very distinct ZMF sound. Like, a ZMF when you hear it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's another piece that kind of goes into the video. I think you did a video recently about that, where it's like multiple headphones, right? Like, it's not every day that I want to listen to the ZMF closed, for instance, or even the Elysia or the SR1A. Like, they all do different things, and sometimes it's like, I don't really want to hear that, Like, sometimes, tubes. Like, I love my tube amps. Like, my HD800 with the bottle crack, or like the any of the ZMFs with the tubes. It's just all of a sudden something that you're used to hearing a certain way on those. on a solid state, for instance, you switch them to a tube, and all of a sudden they're a different headphone. Like there's that piece of it too. So I think that you got to have that flavor. I think that's because that's that uniqueness. I think that's that spice of life, as they say, right? Like you have
I need
that,
to get
that variety.
I need to get more into tubes. I used to be into the idea, and then I started paying. I started paying way too much attention to things that don't matter.
Well, I have a gift for you here this week.
Yeah. That'll be exciting because I hear I'm excited to hear the Verite open on the
pendant.
Yeah.
Good, man. Yeah. It's unique. Yeah, definitely play with the different tubes. The older looking ones is probably the best way to describe it. Are some of the better ones for me. I like those ones. But just play with them.
See how it goes. That was like the first amp that I bought. I think was a tube amp, and I'm sure it measured some Hi-Fi Man tube amp, but I'm sure it measured horribly. The thing fell apart on me. The knob fell off.
I'm trying to think, like a lot of those they're not OTLs too. So there's
they're hybrids.
The pendant's not an OTL either.
It's not.
It has
it's a rectifier, isn't it?
Yeah, like it has. God,
I thought it was.
Rates. They I think it's
single-ended triode or.
Yeah, they have the transformer on it to help with it, whereas the.
Oh, okay. I see. I got you.
So that's to help with the impedance, basically. Impedance.
It's the opposite. If you put a transformer on it, you're adding impedance.
But yeah, like it's more along the lines of the KN HA1A Mark II. Honestly, for me, as far as sound, like that has that. It's a tube. I call it tube neutral, if that makes sense. Like where it has like it's not as gooey. To use those audiophile terms.
But that's That's people always say the Verite on like Glen OTL is like the.
I heard it's amazing, honestly. Like I heard it at ZM Festivus, and it was.
Man, I wish I could go to that. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, that was a fun time, man. And honestly, Bevan and Zach, those guys are that whole team. Their whole team that they have those guys are guys and gals. Are awesome. Like they're probably the nicest and most deserving like makers of headphones in the space. Sorry, my camera being all weird, but Anyways, but it goes back to that flavor type thing, right? Like you want to be able to have. To me, anyways, like I like having that variety. I like having the option to move around. If I did to go back to like the crowd that thinks that they can have like if they there's also budget and take into consideration that kind of thing. And for me, I think the HD 6XX series 650 600s, I think those are to me those are the best all-arounders at that price point, right?
They kind of break the price bracket. Like there's nothing else really around that. I mean, now at the Sandara, I guess I think. But
I'm not like I said, I'm not hi-fi or a hi-fi man. I'm not a planar guy, so not my preference. But I will say though, to me, the ZMF Aeolus is to me the probably the total can for most people, if that makes sense. Like for the masses, I would say the Aeolus basically covers if you're going to spend a lot of money on a headphone, you only wanted to have one.
Yeah.
To me, that's the one I would say is.
I only heard it once, and it was yours at the Seattle meet, the previous one.
I have a new one now. I have a Blackwood.
Oh,
wait,
so you have two?
No, I sold the Zero.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Grab it. The Zero. I have the Blackwoods now.
Cool. When I heard them, they definitely sounded good to me. I think that. I mean, it sounded like Harman, pretty close to Harman. More so than the Verite, because the Verite is not Harman. The Verite is more like if you took a 650 and then gave it better extension, but then cut 3k hertz or 3.2k hertz, and it's weird. It's okay, nice. Oh yeah, I like how the light picks it up too. I like how you have like a dummy head for that. Yeah. But yeah, like it's weird. Listening to the Verite has demonstrated something to me that I did not think about before. When I was even just getting into, for the years that I've been into headphones, listening to the Verite, because it cuts, so the balance overall is decent. Like there's no dramatic tilt one way or another. Actually, the balance follows the Harman curve relatively closely, but with that cut in the, let's call it upper mid range there, around 3k hertz, between 3 and 5k. I mean, who knows what it actually cuts, because I don't know if anybody's measured it on a industry standard rig, but there's definitely a recession there somewhere. But the way that it's done to cut out the it's done to cut out a specific resonance for certain instruments. And what that does is it almost creates this additional sense of space. It creates this additional, like, again, to use an audiophile term, blackness of background or separation quality. And of course, the drivers they can do this as well, and they're remarkable. But the fact that it was withdrawn when I was playing with my EQ and brought it back to get it to be a little bit more linear, if I did get it to be linear, suddenly it's like, okay, yeah, there's more, you can actually hear more stuff because it's not being cut out as much. But at the same time, I understand now why it's tuned the way that it is, and I understand now why. I mean, people talk about coloration. When you listen to the Verite, you go, oh no, that makes sense. Now I understand why people would want to have a bit of a color of coloration there, because it's a flavor of the sound, almost like if are you guys familiar with what a comb filter is? It's like a notch filter with several notches. I'm getting too technical here, but basically it reminds me of what's going on with that, where specific sections are cut out to give a different perception of that sound. And it's something that, like, when I try other headphones that don't have this cut there, yeah, there's more, like, it's actually more to my liking. I prefer more to be more linear there, but they don't have that same quality. So that's why I'm looking forward to other reviewers getting their hands on a Verite, because I want to hear what they have to say about that same kind of quality, that same withdrawn quality for very specific resonant tones, and just to see what people think about it. Anyways, that's why Wheezy needs to get his hands on some as well. I do have more questions for Wheezy, but we should probably wrap it up here quick. I did want to just sort of dovetail off of the question about we were talking about the ZM Festivus. Last question, guys. Are there any events or meetups or things like that you have an opportunity to go to where you are in the UK, or in just maybe somewhere in Europe?
Like Can Jam, but
yeah. Do you ever go to meetups, or is that even a thing where you are?
Can Jam in London this year, June, isn't it? I think I'm thinking about going along to that one. I don't know if there's much else, to be honest, in the UK.
Yeah.
At least not aimed at like the end user sort of people, like trade shows and stuff like that. I'm sure there's plenty of stuff like that. But yeah, Can Jam in June. I might go along to that.
Have you been to one of those before?
I haven't. So I'm not really sure what to expect.
It's funny. This is so I think, at least ideally, going to Can Jam New York, and this is going to be my first one of those events as well. So I'm mostly just sort of excited to meet all the rest of these people, because like I only know them through brief interactions on Discord and or Twitter or wherever else, my YouTube comments. So it'll be nice to actually meet some of you guys. And that pretty much covers everything. I mean, is there anything you guys want to talk about? Hearing nothing.
Sorry. I was messing around with my wonderful camera again.
Yeah. We've been going for like almost 2.5 hours. So
I think that's the other issue. I think it's the batteries are heating up too much in my camera.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Which I'm just swapping them. That's how I've been getting around it.
One day Wheezy will get into a conversation more about frequency response and get even more nerdy than than where we're being.
Oh, I was going to bring up the Austrian Audio Hi X55s.
Yes, I haven't heard those yet. Have you?
No, they're not out yet.
Okay.
I think they're coming out next month. I really want to get my hands on a pair. They look like they're going to be a bit expensive for closed back monitor headphones, but it's because you keep you've used the phrase high excursion quite a few times, and that's literally in their name. So I wonder if this means that they're going to have a real load of slam.
Well, if they're dynamic drivers, they should be
Right back,
able
guys.
to, especially close back. Yeah. So, as far as I understand, again, for anybody watching, Austrian Audio is what AKG used to. So AKG, all the people there moved to Austrian Audio. Is that correct? The engineers who are developing AKG headphones.
As far as I know, there's 28 engineers that moved from AKG. I think they were actually microphone engineers rather than headphone engineers.
Oh, okay.
Interesting. I don't know if they were all microphone engineers.
Yeah, and that was, I don't know if this was right when AKG was bought by Samsung, but it could have been related to that. But in any case, it'd be interesting because, I mean, AKG's been doing the Harman thing, especially now with this new, like the 371s and whatnot. It'll be interesting to see what Austrian Audio does, and if that also is tuned specifically with that in mind. Because again, the whole point of, like, when the Harman curve was operationalized in headphones, it was almost as market research more than anything else. But of course, it became this research thing. The goal of it, though, was to be able to develop headphones based on this curve that matched the consumer preference. And so, if you're a manufacturer, if your company producing headphones, it would stand to reason that you should want to tune something to what the consumer preference curve would be, because that's what the market research indicates. It indicates that that's the best tonality for everybody, or at least the general tonality that everybody wants. And so what I wonder, though, is, I mean, for Austrian Audio, do they have the ability to do this? Basically, it's not really a question of, of target curves. It's more a question of whether or not they're able to pull it off. At least that's in my opinion.
I suppose they're a boutique brand, aren't they? Now that they may have been part of AKG, which were a big company, but now they're basically a boutique brand with such a small team of people. But they're obviously guys who know what they're doing, so it's really interesting to see what they're going to come up with. I'm quite excited by that.
Yeah, I would expect something to be Harman-like. I don't see why they would, have any sort of deviation from that, especially given that they have a lot of experience, and also especially if it's in the microphone, like if they're microphone engineers. This goes back to the stream that we just had with Metal 571, where he brought up the circle of confusion. I think if you're tuning headphones and you you recognize the problem of the circle of confusion, which is, of course, that nothing is really tuned to be perfectly flat. You always end up having something, whether it's in the mastering of the track you're listening to, and then the microphone. So you have no baseline, so you keep going around and around and around. You have no reference point really. And so if you're a manufacturer and you're tuning a headphone and you already understand the problem that the circle of confusion demonstrates, I think it only makes sense to make it a Harman tuning, because then we don't need to care as much about the scientific neutral or whatever that ends up being, if that's even a thing, because then we can just say, okay, this follows the general curve of where the different gain factors are for the ear, and the rest of it we'll just leave it up to what preference indicates, what preference tells us, and that's what the Harman research is all about. So I think it's going to be interesting to see whether or not they're able to pull it off.
Yeah. I mean, when I was saying earlier about I'd like to see more Harman research implemented, more Harman target stuff, I don't mean like exclusively by that, by the way, just to make sure that everyone's sure of that. I like the flavor in different headphones, hence why I've got my two best headphones are like completely different from each other.
Yeah.
But like to have something to shoot for, you know, you can have different flavors of it, but had to have something to shoot for that at least now, oh, everyone knows that this is kind of what people, this is going to work. It's not something so completely wacky like some manufacturers like to do something completely crazy or not even tuned at all.
Yeah.
And like, why?
That actually makes me think of something. I'll just bring it up quickly. But I have okay. So I get the feeling that there are manufacturers who do exactly this. They'll just tune something. I can think of countless headphones that are like this. Which is like, why did you tune it like this? Actually, even the Sennheiser HD820 over there, that is the strangest frequency response I've ever seen.
I love that headphone. Well, I like the look of it.
It's just I'm not yeah, like technically it performs, it performs quite well, but it's just the strangest frequency response. And you think, why wouldn't they just tune it to the Harman curve? Why wouldn't they? And my feeling is the answer for that is because what they're trying to do, their objective is to try and get it to be a closed back HD800S, or try and get that same soundstage, the speaker like presentation. And when they're doing something like that, they need to make concessions as far as tonality goes, because the implementation of whatever it is requires certain things. And I think with that one, it demonstrates the limitations of the glass, the concave glass design that they have for sealing it off. But then they wouldn't have necessarily been able to get the soundstage qualities if they hadn't done that. So it makes me think, they probably ran into issues and implementing their goal with a closeback, and then that required a tuning that wasn't as Harman-like as we would have wanted. Because actually, if you think about the HD800S, the HD800S is fairly Harman-like. I mean, that sounds counterintuitive because the HD800 wasn't particularly. It's more what they call, again, diffuse field loudness, or loudness diffuse field tuned. But the bass emphasis that was added to the HD800S actually does get closer to Harman. But just dovetailing quickly off of that idea about implementing different technologies for drivers, these IEMs, these are Empire Ears IEMs, and I've been reviewing them, and there's certain things that they do that I really like, but I occasionally get the feeling that what they're not paying attention to necessarily to what the headphone ends up being tuned to, like the bottom line, like frequency response. I think and I could be totally wrong about this, so I apologize in advance if that's the case, but I occasionally get the feeling that a lot of these IEM manufacturers they're just making technological advancements as far as driver type goes and what's possible with drivers. And then they're saying, okay, well, we've developed this new driver type. Let's see what happens when we put it with this other driver type. And it's sort of like a bit of a mad science experiment where the concern is more about pushing the boundaries and pushing the envelopes on what's possible from a technical standpoint. And that's why with the Legend X, for example, you get those W9, they call them the subwoofers for bass in IEMs, which is like, yeah, that is bass in IEMs. But I also feel that at least that's my impression, is that not every IEM is produced in a way that's meant to care about the end result tonality. It feels like a lot of IEMs are produced in a way to try and just push the boundaries for what's possible with the technology that's being used. Improve the technology for balanced armature drivers, or figure out how to get electrostatic drivers in IEMs, stuff like that, and then saying, okay, well, let's put it in here, and this is what we ended up with, rather than going, oh, we want it specifically to follow this bass shelf here by this much, and then follow the right Harman curve, and etc. I think it shows up when you compare IEMs, like this is the Zeus 14 from Masterop. When you compare something like that to even just something like the Campfire Andromeda, which also, I mean, who knows? I don't know if they care too much about the bottom line for tonality and frequency response either, because for a lot of their IEMs, they're not tuned to Harman either. But yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think about like implementing driver technology or implementing technical advancements versus aiming specifically for a target curve?
I think they need to do both, really.
But one should be in the service of the other, in a way,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just implementing certain technical things doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to sound good, and it has to sound good first.
Yeah.
And like, there are IEMs with like, I don't know, 20 different drivers in them, and there are IEMs with one in, and there
Yeah.
are IEMs with just one driver that sound absolutely fantastic, and there are IEMs with multiple drivers
Yeah.
and all kinds of weird things going on that sound terrible. So it's like the technology, yeah, the technology is only part of the whole thing, I think.
But that's, I mean, we were talking about engineers, like the Austrian Audio AKG engineers, and like, I just, part of me wonders if, again, in the engineering process, if the, let's say if the goalposts are better driver technology, not necessarily better frequency response, and then we'd end up with this disconnect between, the result is a product that doesn't actually sound that good, because the goalposts for better driver technology end up being emphasized because that's what the engineers are more interested in doing. It's just a random thought that I had. I don't know if that's actually true, but
well, I think that's actually pretty. I mean, how else are you going to shake up the space, right? Without doing
you got to do something different.
Technology. So I mean, even look at the focals.
Yeah.
Even the SR1As to the headphones. I mean, these guys are implementing stuff like speaker technology and putting them into a headphone. Like, does it work? Or focal with the beryllium drivers, or like maybe different materials, planars, like the Mez Empyrean, changing the way the planar driver shaped and stuff like that. Like, so I think like with that comes, there's going to be some failures, or there's going to be some things that are like, oh, that might not have worked. But without doing that, how are you going to know? How are you going to advance if you don't fail? That's the whole.
With the focal Alire, I don't think that was, I don't think it's a bad headphone at all, actually. But you can see the difference between the focal Alire and the focal Clear. Mm-hmm. And I think they wanted to get something like the focal Clear, which, I mean, they're both aluminum magnesium driver headphones, but the main difference between the two is that the Clear uses the formless voice coil and the Alire doesn't. So the Alire actually has, I think, higher mobile mass, whereas the Clear has less. But anyways, that the idea of pushing the boundaries on technology, when you're implementing this kind of stuff, I think the first iteration isn't necessarily what the end result needs to be, but or what the best one ends up being. But just getting back to that all headphones tuned to the Harman target idea. This is the last point. We'll end after this. If I think what you just said there, Tyler, is really important, because you got to do something different, because technically we've already achieved the Harman target, right? Like, there are headphones out there that do a pretty good job of hitting the Harman target. Like, for me, it's like the Hi-Fi Man Ananda, or the I mean, it's maybe not quite. It's not quite, but it's pretty damn close. Even honestly, the LCD one is pretty close. There's lots of headphones that basically achieve the Harman target, or close enough to it. And yes, we can refine and get even closer and closer and closer to it. But if you are a manufacturer and you're coming at it and you're like, okay, how are we gonna what are we gonna do that sets us apart? Maybe we tune it to the Harman target, but we do something else with, you do a formless voice coil, or you do some sort of hybrid system with an M-shaped dome like Focal did for the driver. And I think doing something different, it doesn't entail not tuning it. It doesn't entail tuning it to something that isn't the Harman target. But I wonder if that's also one of the reasons why people don't aim for the Harman target necessarily, is because they're trying to go for something.
Their flavor.
Yeah, they're trying to, and for better or for worse. I think often for worse. But it's one of those things where I wonder, if it's because of the priorities of, you know, selling headphones or producing headphones that are to a market, and then making whatever it is that you're doing stand out a bit. I wonder if that's why. Anyways, I will leave it there. This has been awesome. A ton of fun chatting with you guys. It's been 2 hours and 40 minutes. So I really want to thank Wheezy for joining us here. It's great to talk to you, man. And I would love to talk more with you. So I'll probably, if you don't mind, I'll probably ask you to come on again another time, and we can get even more nerdy. Everybody who's still with us, go and check out Wheezy Reviews and all of his stuff. He really knows what he's there. Yeah, he really knows what he's talking about, and especially if you are into, you know, the frequency response related stuff, like I am, definitely check out his stuff. And also, what was the name of the blog?
It's just Wheezy.reviews.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah.
Alrighty, and for Tyler and myself, I will sign off. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Thanks for having me on here.
Good time, Wheezy.
To that, are we ended? I don't know if we're ended yet.
It looks like it may.
I think Google randomly signed me out like halfway through the stream, and now it's asking me for like two-factor authentication.
Yeah, I'm